Every beginning has an end, and every story must finish. But sometimes we look at people throughout history who had so much more to offer, and we are sorry that they left us wanting more. Welcome to So to Speak. I'm Lyle Groniger.
And I'm Evan Mead. And we're going to talk about quite a few historical chapters that either ended too soon or the book was just closed too soon.
We're going to talk about musicians whose lives ended too soon, either by their own hand or the hand of another, or by a force of nature that was out of everyone's control. This will be a very tender subject, so if you are cautious or sensitive about the subject, then we may ask that you maybe click off at this point.
Trigger. Essentially what my friend is trying to say is there's a trigger warning. The first singer-songwriter on my list is a fellow whose album I talked about on our last episode, Jim Croce. Now, Jim Croce was born in 1943, and he died at the age of 30 in 1973. The story behind Jim Croce, he was a really powerful, up-and-coming soft rock artist. I already talked about on our last episode the album You Don't Mess Around with Jim, but what's really kind of dark about Jim Croce is that on the Thursday night of September 20th, 1973, Croce was on a tour, and what happened was the day before his ABC single I Got a Name was released, and just a side note, I Got a Name turned out to be one of the biggest songs that he would ever be known for. Probably that and Operator and Time in a Bottle are probably his three biggest tunes. The night before I Got a Name was released, Croce and all 5 members of his band were killed when their chartered Beechcraft E-18S crashed into a tree during takeoff from a regional airport in Louisiana. The region is called I have trouble pronouncing the name of this location. I apologize to anyone who lives there, but Natchitoches, Louisiana. Croce was taken from us way too young at the age of 30. I feel like had he stuck around for a little while longer, he could have provided such a powerful sound to the world if he had the chance to just keep on releasing records, because he died with maybe 2 or 3 albums under his belt. So, but the stuff he did is really, really good. So he made the most of his time here, but he was taken from us way too soon. And I do wish that I could have heard more work from him, but that's kind of the tone of this episode. Once again, we apologize to our viewers. We just felt like, there's some great artists in this world, and sometimes, it just doesn't work out for them. Mm-hmm. Either tragedy gets in the way or whatever else gets in the way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My anxiety's kind of going up because I really hope we can do this topic justice, quite honestly.
Well, if you're going to talk about a musician you talked about on our last album episode, please check that out. I'm going to talk about Ian Curtis, the lead singer of post-punk band Joy Division, who I mentioned last in the album episode. When it comes to the history of Ian Curtis, he is often seen as a very tragic figure in rock. Developing epilepsy and depression in his early adult years, Curtis's stage performances contained a flurry of erratic dancing and out-of-breath vocal work. Many people in the audience thought this was a part of the act, and no one was quite aware of his actual illness behind the curtain. A lot of people actually decided to call it the epileptic dance, because when you see it, it's very erratic and uncontrolled. So that's kind of where the name stuck. And because epilepsy was not an illness that was fully examined or taken all that much seriously as it is now, treatments were often very ineffective or laden with side effects. While Curtis was medicated, he would often be very groggy and unresponsive, and very disaffected. Many shows would culminate in Ian having a seizure or suffer one hours later at the side of his wife anytime he came home after a show. Flashing lights were eventually banned from Joy Division shows after many incidences. However, that still didn't stop the seizures from coming because Curtis could still be triggered on or set off by loud percussion, which was unavoidable. Curtis began to fear that his condition would eventually kill him. Yes, back in those days, you could actually succumb to epilepsy. And he witnessed this himself during a interview he had with a job applicant who actually had the same condition as his, a young woman who had to wear a helmet on her head to prevent any head trauma that would occur during a seizure, which eventually led to the single "She's Lost Control." On top of everything, Curtis also began to have struggles becoming a musician and becoming popular, but as well as having a deteriorating marriage with his wife Deborah, which eventually led to him having an affair with his publicist to kind of cope with that all. Ashamed after he was caught by his wife for infidelity, she finalized a divorce and decided to have full custody of their daughter. After the news, Curtis attempted suicide by devouring a bottle of pills. Luckily, he was resuscitated. However, after recuperating and on the eve of Joy Division's first North American tour, Ian asked his wife to reconsider the divorce. However, he later relented and demanded to spend the night alone. The next morning, on May 18th, 1980, at the age of 23, Ian Curtis's body was found by his wife. He ended his life by wrapping his neck with washing line and hanging himself off with a Sheila maid. And if you don't know what a Sheila maid is, it's an overhanging dryer, like a rack that's very heavy. It's usually held against a wall by a hook, so it's very dangerous if used in that context. All throughout those work, many feelings of isolation, mental disorders, and depression traced their way into Curtis's songwriting, leaving a gloomy impression after the aftermath set in. All the members of Joy Division were completely surprised after they had studied all the lyrics and realized just how troubled Ian truly was. And after Joy Division dissolved, the remaining members of the group went on to form New Order, a new wave outfit that went on to continue with great success, even garnering the most successful 12-inch record sale in music history. Blue Monday, in case you ever want to check that out. It's a good single.
Oh, yeah, that's a great song.
Yeah, that is essential 80s right there. So, providing one of the most highly regarded albums of all time, Unknown Pleasures, Ian Curtis left an indelible mark in the history of music. I don't know if he would have continued music, honestly. I don't know what he would have done to cope with this. I'm sure if this was like in modern times, there'd be like more ways of him being able to perform live and to cope with the trigger mechanisms that set him off. Yeah. But I don't know, it was just such a wrong time to have that kind of affliction. It's very sad. It was just unfortunate. Yeah. Yep. Well, Evan, what's your next choice?
The next guy I'm going to talk about was another very influential artist in his respective genre. However, we're going to go into the world of rap today, and yes, there's going to be a couple rappers that are going to come up on this show. Mm-hmm. First one, a lot of good friends that I grew up with were fans of this guy, Tupac Shakur. Mm-hmm. Now, Tupac Shakur is debatably, and I do mean debatably, the greatest rapper of all time, because when my friends introduced me to his music, even though I'm not, partial to rap music, I can appreciate some rap music. There's something about Tupac's lyrics that are very, very powerful. Probably one of the most powerful songs I've ever heard, it was Dear Mama. That's another really good one. So Tupac was born in Manhattan, and while he did live in New York City for quite some time, he relocated to Baltimore, Maryland in 1984, and then to California, specifically the San Francisco Bay Area, in 1988. This was when he was a teenager, and then in 93 he moved to LA to further pursue his music career. And then his debut album, Tupacalypse Now, when that came out in 1991, that's when he that's when he really started to make a name for himself. And he basically came up with more albums, specifically Strictly for My Knees, and there was also Me Against the World, and those two albums came out in 93 and in 95 respectively.
Are you gonna bring up a certain somebody who came across his path?
Are you talking about? Well, he had rivalries with quite a few rappers in the industry, and
there's one.
Yeah. I was going to get into that because his rivalries would ultimately take a tragic and horrific dark turn. One of the last career milestones he had was signing a contract with Suge Knight at Death Row Records, and this is what's so shady. Like, I really don't know what to say about, the kind of rivalries that he had. But, it's, I don't really know how to talk about that. But, his personal life, he had friends and he had enemies in the rap community. That's all I can really say without going into too much detail. But very tragically, on September 7th, 1996, he took a trip to Las Vegas to actually celebrate his business partner's birthday. But he was shot 4 times in a drive-by shooting and on Las Vegas Boulevard. And what's scary is, to this day, his murder is still unsolved. And it's been almost 25 years.
Yeah.
Actually, no shit. It will have been 25 years since September. And Tupac Shakur was taken from us at the age of 25. Quite honestly, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about how I don't claim to know the truth behind any of these conspiracy theories, but there are several conspiracy theories behind who is responsible for the murder of Tupac Shakur. According to what my close friend, who is a fan of Tupac, has told me, that although no one really knows for sure, some people believe that Biggie Smalls, another rapper, was actually put a hit on Tupac. Some people say Suge Knight was indirectly responsible for the murder. What's also another tragedy that is connected to this case somewhat is Notorious B.I.G. was another friend/rival that he had in the business. Notorious B.I.G. was actually a murder suspect in this case, but 6 months later, Notorious B.I.G. was murdered himself. So, but the influence that Tupac Shakur had on the world of music and the world of rap, it was so powerful that decades later, they actually went out of their... Some technical genius actually was able to resurrect him as a hologram for a concert. Yeah. And now, how do you feel about these characters that we are talking about today? These people.
Characters.
But
you wonder how I feel if you took on John Lennon and you turn him into a hologram.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to John Lennon in a bit.
We will. But I don't know. It seems I could see why people would find it a little sacrilegious. Why sacrilegious? Goddamn Simpsons. And why I would feel like it would be a little bit of a betrayal, or it'd feel a bit awkward to kind of see another person just being inhibited by machines and computers.
Because you have to remember their family is watching.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, as long as it's respectful to the estate, as long as they're doing a respectful job portraying the person as they are, and I mean, it's a hot button issue. I don't really have a clear answer. I guess if I saw Kurt Cobain holographic, it'd be well, this is kind of the only chance in my life I'm ever gonna see him perform. But I mean, at the end of the day, it wouldn't be exactly the same.
And the hologram is just going to be lip syncing to a pre-recorded version of their songs. But then again, in the modern concerts, more often than people are willing to admit, quite a few musicians, when they go up on stage, a lot of the time they are lip syncing their lyrics to pre-recorded stuff. So that's the story of Tupac. May he rest in peace. Who's next?
My next pick is Bradley Nowell, the lead singer, guitarist, and primary songwriter of ska punk band Sublime. So to get into the history of Sublime, it's gonna be kind of it's not gonna be too much of a lecture, but basically after releasing 2 albums and struggling to break into the music scene, Nowell sort of had a bit of a downward spiral in the latter chunk of Sublime's history. He got very dependent on heroin and other substances, and it kind of, I think, I don't have much claim for this, but I almost feel like when I hear a lot of musicians, they always say that drugs make them write better. And I feel that might be a claim that Bradley might have lived by, because he wrote a lot before his untimely death, especially when it got to the creation of the next album I'm going to talk about. But before that, he did try to attempt sobriety after the birth of his son in 1995. But unfortunately, he relapsed 1 year later during the creation of the self-titled album, the album that everyone knows. This definitely affected the workflow of the creation of the self-titled album, and it was really marred by Nowell's reckless behavior and constant partying and lack of focus, to the point where like the band and even the studio had to eject him from the recording process, like with the last 2 months left to do. At the age of 28, Nowell was found dead of a heroin overdose at his hotel room. His body was discovered by Sublime drummer Bud Gow, who found him and his pet Dalmatian Lou dog, who served as the band's mascot, who was laid curled next to him whimpering.
Jesus.
So that dog stuck with him to the end. Good old Lou. Despite releasing the self-titled album about 2 months after his passing, the album proved to be a massive success for Sublime, catapulting them to garnering much airtime, breaking charts, and launching Sublime as one of the most successful rock acts of 1997. It's kind of sobering, or I guess like sad in a way, whenever you see like a music video to say like Santeria. Anytime you'll see like Eric and Bud, and they're just like sort of acting in front of the camera, but anytime they need to show Bradley, they have to use like stock footage from like concerts and like kind of like superimpose them into the shots, and it's just kind of sad. It's like, oh, he just missed. He unfortunately had to miss like the moment where his band got huge.
Yeah. And
then they naturally dissolved. But in 2009, Gow and bassist Eric Wilson regrouped with longtime fan Rome Ramirez to continue with Sublime's legacy. And while there was a little bit of friction with Bradley Nowell's estate, to the point where they almost got sued, eventually they just changed the name to Sublime with Rome, and everything was fine. And they have continued to tour to this day, despite Gow departing from the project. But they still tour. So yeah, I think Sublime, despite how like kind of chill they are and how nice it is to kind of listen to them on a nice day, like in a barbecue or something, it's just there is this undercurrent of like desperation that kind of comes from a lot of the lyrics, especially if you listen to songs like Smoke Two Joints or 40 Ounce to Freedom, or Bad Fish is probably the best example, where you can tell that Bradley really regrets some of the like decisions that kind of led him to this path. Like one of the lyrics in Bad Fish is like, "I swim, but I wish I never learned. The water's too polluted with germs." He just wish he never like took foot into like the heavier side of drugs and addiction. And that's too bad. It's just sometimes there's not an easy answer or an easy way out.
Yeah.
And actually his son is actually in a band too, and he seems pretty healthy and like pretty happy with what he does and carrying on. So yeah, I don't know. Like I think Sublime is an excellent band to listen to. I actually just joined a cover band for Sublime, and I've learned even more about. I've learned even more of an appreciation for the band itself after joining. So, yeah. Highly recommend Sublime. I might cover them in an album episode sometime soon. We'll see.
I'd like that very much.
Yeah. So yeah, what's your next one, Evan?
The next musician I'm going to talk about, not only did his death like leave a hole in the hearts of many fans, this guy's death broke up one of the greatest bands in history. Case in point, John Bonham,
Uh,
the only drummer of Led Zeppelin. Now, John Bonham was taken from us at the age of 32. Now, just a little bit of background on John Paul Jones, Robert Plant, and Jimmy Page, and John Bonham. These guys, Led Zeppelin really needs no introduction. Like, they started in the late 1960s, and by the 1970s, they were like kings of the world. Like, they were redefining rock and roll. They made their mark on a genre, and it was absolutely beautiful. I personally, this particular pick is difficult for me to talk about because Led Zeppelin was one of the first bands that actually had me understand rock and roll, and I was even more set. Like I remember having one of the supervisors in an after-school program I was in was a huge fan of Led Zeppelin, and she actually loaned me like this scrapbook of like, you know, pictures of them when they were in rehearsals, and you know, pictures of them on tour, and just how tight they were, and how, you know, they all like, you know, came together to write their songs, and how their songs were written. When I listened to John Bonham's drumming, it is some powerful stuff. Personally, because our good friend Josh is actually a drummer. We should mention that. So, ever since like Josh got into drumming, I kind of listen to rock albums with, you know, just specifically for the drums. But I listen mainly for vocals and electric guitar stuff. Lyle, you're a little more different because you'll listen to to a rock song for its bass because you yourself are a bassist. But yeah, that's just the way I interpret music. But the song to me where John Bonham's drumming stands out the most was always either Four Sticks or Rock and Roll.
Yeah, Rock and Roll's really great.
Yeah,
I liked his work on Kashmir actually.
Yeah,
it's not incredibly complex, but it just hits so hard.
Yeah,
or like When the Levee Breaks.
Yeah.
I love that sound.
Yeah, no, it's great. Especially, it sounds like an echoey too, like.
Yeah, it's filtered.
So, anyways, this is where the tragedy strikes. So, John Bonham died at age 32 in the year 1980. So, when the 70s ended, it was kind of the end of an era all around. So, this is what happened. On September 24th, 1980, Bonham was picked up by Led Zeppelin assistant Rex King to attend rehearsals at Bray Studios for a North American tour that was set to begin on October 17th in Montreal, Quebec, right here at home. This would have been the band's first tour since 1977. During the journey, Bonham asked to stop for breakfast, where he drank 4 quadruple vodka screwdrivers. That's 16 shots between 400 and 560 milliliters, also the equivalent of 9-13 in terms of like the blood alcohol level. Yeah. So he continued to drink heavily, and then after arriving at the rehearsals, the band stopped rehearsing late in the evening, and then they went to Page's house, which was the old mill house in Clewer, Windsor. And at midnight on September 25th, Bonham fell asleep. Someone took him to bed and placed him on his side. Led Zeppelin tour manager Benji Lefebvre and John Paul Jones, the bassist, found him unresponsive the next afternoon. Bonham was later pronounced dead at the age of 32.
How did they manage to serve that much alcohol in one sitting? Like that,
it's insane.
Like,
but
anyone nowadays would just cut you off after a while. Like, you can't have that much.
Well, then again, like...
That's so bad.
Yeah, well, then again, like, these guys are, like, rock and roll gods. Like,
It's the 70s, I guess. They didn't have restrictions like they do now.
Yeah,
like,
and the conversation around alcohol wasn't the same as it is today.
No.
Now,
that's too bad.
After a funeral was held, John Bonham left behind a brother and a sister... And he also left behind, he was a married man. He left behind a wife, Pat Phillips, and the couple had 2 children. And Zoe and Jason Bonham, respectively. And his younger brother was Mick Bonham, and his younger sister was Deborah Bonham. Now, rather than replace John Bonham, Led Zeppelin chose to disband out of respect for their deceased bandmate. They said in a press release on December 4th, 1980, "We wish it to be known that the loss of our dear friend and the deep respect that we have for his family, together with the sense of undivided harmony felt by ourselves and our manager, have led us to decide that we could not continue as we were." No.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of too many people who could have replaced him, honestly.
Yeah.
It's very, drummers are, they're really hard to find, especially when they're incredibly proficient.
Yeah.
The way he was.
Yeah.
It's like the one member that's sometimes very difficult to replace.
Yeah. But
I mean, it's too bad that Led Zeppelin never really carried out any touring afterwards, and it was just kind of like a permanent disbanding.
But they were, Led Zeppelin was, on top, they were on top of their game when this happened. And I feel like, and considering how many tribute bands have taken up the mantle.
Greta Van Fleet.
Yeah. No, there are, tribute bands that have dedicated their lives to resurrecting Led Zeppelin songs. I have a feeling that had John Bonham's alcoholism not got the better of him, I feel like Led Zeppelin could have been around for another 2 decades. They could have been up there with bands that are still on stage, Rolling Stones,
yeah.
Kiss. Although it is worth mentioning that Jimmy Page did go on to be in the band Them Crooked Vultures, correct? Or am I thinking of John Paul Jones? Yeah, John Paul Jones did go on to be the bassist for the band Them Crooked Vultures, along with that.
They all still worked, yeah.
Yeah, so the musicians went their separate ways, did their things, but had this not happened, I feel like Led Zeppelin could have been around with all the other legendary bands from back then that are still playing today.
I'm kind of picturing what Led Zeppelin would have sounded like in the MTV era and the glam age.
Oh Lord,
the grunge era.
Well, do you think maybe they would have changed their sound like the Chili Peppers did? And
I don't know. I don't know. They had such a concrete sound. I don't know how they could have adapted it.
Yeah.
They had such an epic sense of musicianship.
Maybe they would have taken a page out of Peter Frampton's book and tried to incorporate some electronics into their songs.
Oh, that would have been nice.
Yeah.
Electronic Zeppelin, that would have been cool.
Well, Peter Frampton was kind of ahead of his time in that respect, so...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways...
now I really want to think about it.
Yeah, no, I know this is a sad story, but
because I saw a Led Zeppelin laser rock show, and I just want to think electronic Led Zeppelin. I'm gonna dream about that tonight. That's a nice thought.
So
Led Zeppelin carrying on.
I mean, you gotta find happy things to talk about when you're talking about stuff like this.
I mean, the thing is, it's just life. I mean, it's unfortunate it happens, and ultimately, at least there's a legacy to be said.
Yeah, well, it's just amazing, what this guy was, what John Bonham was a part of. It could have been something truly amazing, and it is, regardless of whether or not it
continued. They left enough of an impression. I wouldn't say it's like Led Zeppelin ended too soon, but they could have went further for sure.
They could have went even further because they already had a ton of albums under their belt by the time the 70s were over.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that we were robbed of the opportunity to hear what they could have been throughout the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, I see. I understand.
Anyways, who's next?
My next. So I had a treasure trove of people from the 90s to talk about. I mean, certainly I could have talked about Chris Cornell, or I could have talked about Lane Staley. But honestly, I kind of want to give a shout out to someone who doesn't really, kind of falls under the radar a lot when you talk about musicians who kind of passed away too soon. And that person is Shannon Hoon of the alternative rock band Blind Melon. So Hoon began his musical career when founding members of Blind Melon, Brad Smith and Roger Stevens, witnessed him playing Change on acoustic, which was his first song. He was playing at a party. They really liked it. It's you have style. We want to work with you. And they promptly asked him to become the front man of their band. And after recording their first demos, Hoon was you'll like this part. Hoon was catapulted into the airwaves after befriending a high school friend who happened to be friends with none other than Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses.
Oh wow!
And Rose, who was working on the Use Your Illusion albums at the time, invited Hoon onto the studio, and Hoon actually sung backing vocals for a couple of tracks.
Oh wow!
And this gave him the confidence to think that he had what it took to become like a really big vocalist.
Yeah.
And during the release of their self-titled debut, Blind Melon garnered massive success after their hit single "No Rain" hit the airwaves and got them multi-platinum recognition. Now, No Rain, I gotta admit, like, I love that song, but it's so crazy. Whenever I mention it, all they think about is, oh, that's the one with the Bumblebee girl from the music video.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. It's like, it's a music video that actually almost eclipses the level of fame the song has, because that's the one thing people think of. That's the power of visual medium, I suppose. But carrying on, this is where things get a little bit dicey. As soon as he began touring, Hoon developed strange erratic behaviors during live shows. In 1993, he was arrested for indecent exposure after he disrobed and urinated onto the crowd during a show in Vancouver. In 1994, during Woodstock 94, Hoon was caught wearing his girlfriend's dress on stage while allegedly high on LSD. And after taking a break from touring due to Hoon's reputation relating to his personal and legal problems, Blind Melon went on to record their sophomore effort, Soup. After leaving rehab and against the judgment of his drug counselor, Hoon agreed to tour with Blind Melon to support the release of their new album. He was attended to by a counselor during these events, but soon he was dismissed. Several weeks into the tour, at the age of 28, Hoon was found dead inside of his tour bus from cardiac arrest, believed to be attributed by a cocaine overdose. Hoon was survived by his wife and daughter, and on his grave, he had the lyrics from Change, the first song he ever wrote, inscribed into his tombstone. And it went on like this. I know we can't all stay here forever, so I want to write my words on the face of today, and they'll paint it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know too much about Blind Melon. I know some people kind of categorize them as like a one-hit wonder kind of band, but they had like this nice roots style that was very indicative of like the flavor of 90s music. I think they don't get as much credit as they deserve sometimes, and I would certainly like to listen to them more often.
Yeah.
So, I take it you haven't really listened to Blind Melon before?
Quite honestly, no.
Okay. Well, yeah, they're a nice band. I think you would get something out of it if you took a listen. So, that was Shannon Hoon. Who's your next pick for the day?
Well, my next pick is actually going to be Chester Bennington from
yes.
the lead singer of Linkin Park. Now, in contrast to my last pick, just because the death of John Bonham broke up Led Zeppelin, the death of Chester Bennington did not break up Linkin Park. They did go on a hiatus after he took his own life, but I will get to that in a second. So, Chester Bennington. It is worth mentioning that as Linkin Park was growing in popularity and going on tours, Bennington was plagued with poor health during the making of the album Meteora, which is one of my personal favorites by Linkin Park. And he struggled to attend some of the album's recording sessions. In the summer of 2003, he began to suffer from extreme abdominal pain and gastrointestinal issues while filming the music video for Numb in Prague. He was forced to return to the United States for surgery and filmed the remainder of the music video in LA. In 2007, he sustained a wrist injury while attempting to jump off a platform during a show in Melbourne, Australia, at the Rod Laver Arena. Despite the injury, he continued to perform the entire show with a broken wrist before heading to the emergency room where he received 5 stitches. And in 2011, Bennington fell ill again, and Linkin Park was forced to cancel 3 shows and reschedule 2 from the A Thousand Suns Worlds Tour. Bennington injured his shoulder during the band's tour in Asia and was advised by doctors to have immediate surgery, and that led to some more cancellations of shows, and it actually ended the tour there. So, so this guy, Bennington, I don't claim to know too much about what was going on in his head, because that's one of the things, like, you know, the health problems that they had are, like, the only clue is still, like, what's really going on with their lives. But so that's a little bit about him and how his issues kind of got in the way of Linkin Park's career. Shortly before 9 a.m. On July 20th, shortly before 9 a.m. Pacific time on July 20th, 2017, Chester Bennington was found dead by his housekeeper at his home in Palos Verdes Estates in California. His death was ruled a suicide by hanging, but Bennington left no suicide note, and Mike Shinoda, the bandmate and close friend of his, confirmed his death on Twitter, writing, "I'm shocked and heartbroken, but it's true. An official statement will come out soon as we have one." And then on July 21st, Brian Elias, the chief of operations for the Office of the Medical Examiner Coroner, confirmed that a half-empty bottle of alcohol was found at the scene, but no other drugs were present. A toxicology report released in December of 2017 reported a trace amount of alcohol in Chester Bennington's system at the time of his death. So their show for that year, the One More Light tour, the tour for that year, the band canceled the rest of their One More Light tour, and they refunded all the tickets. Following his death, Linkin Park took a hiatus until April of 2020, when Dave Farrell revealed that the band is working on new music. So, it's truly sad, though, because there was something about the way Chester's vocals kind of made Linkin Park so identifiable from other music bands in the same vein,
especially in the new metal era.
Yeah.
No, I think Linkin Park, compared to others of their contemporaries, have held up like exceedingly well.
Yeah,
and he had an amazing voice.
That's true. Although, and compared to, what's really sad is I was in high school when Linkin Park was kind of at the peak of their popularity in the late 2000s. And unfortunately, despite the fact that they have an amazing sound, they kind of got lumped in with, Simple Plan and others, and My Chemical Romance as emo rock music.
Yeah, I can kind of see that.
I personally don't think just because something is emo, it doesn't make it bad. I know there was that one song by Simple Plan that kind of became a meme, as cruel as the internet can be. But there is value in this type of music, and
emo is a good genre, actually.
Yeah, but it is really sad that whatever personal issues Chester had did get in the way, and now going forward, the band's announced a year ago that they're going to make new music, so I'm curious as to what that's going to sound like, quite honestly.
I'm curious who they could find to fill in the void that Chester left behind. I'm sure they'll find someone.
Yeah.
But, and it's even crazier to think that his death just briefly came before another musician, Chris Cornell.
He died on Chris Cornell's birthday.
Yeah.
Haunting.
Chester Bennington died on Chris Cornell's birthday, and then not even a week or two afterwards, he passed away.
Yeah. And Chester Bennington, I forgot to mention, he was 41, so that is really young.
He looked very good for his age.
He really did.
He did not look 41 to me.
Yeah, no. So that means he was sounding like he was in his 20s while he was in his early 30s. Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
He was very well trained, I could tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I miss him dearly. And Linkin Park, I think, gets a bad rap every now and then, but I do think they are a very effective band. Yeah. Their sound is very unique. It's very interesting. And yeah, you know what? If they want to keep going, I look forward to seeing how they carry on.
Yeah. Now, I do remember, this is one of the few instances where I remember where I was the day I heard that he died. So I was actually, my brother, who is a motocross rider, he was going to go north. He was driving about an hour north of Toronto to a track in the countryside, and he asked me if I wanted to come with him to take some pictures and some video footage of him rounding some turns. So the morning we were packing up, I saw the new. Well, actually, the day we were actually on our way to the track, because this happened at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Actually, yeah. No, sorry, my memory's a little hazy. I just remember my brother and I either went up to this track either the day after Chester died. But I do remember hearing the news, and I remember my brother and I played Meteora in the car ride up to the track, and it brought back a lot of memories from when my brother and I were teenagers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think when he died, I think I played Shadow of the Day, and I just posted it.
Yeah.
Just in his memory. This is a song that had a little bit more of a hopeful tinge than like something like Faint or Numb or something that's a lot more sadder.
But yeah, no, like, but in terms of like the suicide, like we have no clue what was going on in this guy's head to this day. It's really sad.
Maybe his health was like starting to deteriorate over time, perhaps.
Well,
kind of like Robin Williams.
Yeah, no, it could have been like, maybe he had like a serious health problem that the world didn't know about, and he thought there was no hope of treating it, so he just decided, I'm cutting out early.
That can happen for sure.
Well, because Robin Williamson was diagnosed with the early stages of Parkinson's. Yeah. So, no, as sad as that is, Linkin Park.
Discussion for another day.
It is a discussion for another day, but we will get to that. But with the case of the band Linkin Park, they have shown us that in the situation like this, the show must go on. So we'll see what happens with that.
Okay.
Who's next?
My next pick, and forgive me if my pronunciation is a little bit flimsy. My next pick is Selena Quintanilla Perez, a Mexican-American singer who broke much ground by becoming one of the highest top-selling Latin artists of the 90s. Becoming the queen of Tejano music, which is Texan and Mexican music fusion, which is a nominally male-dominated genre. She was awarded the Music Award for Best Female Vocalist of the Year in this genre, an award she won 9 consecutive times. So she was breaking ground in this genre that was normally just like for guys only, which I think is pretty impressive. At the age of 23, Selena's life was cut tragically short when Yolanda Saldivar, her biggest fan, shot her to death at a Days Inn motel. And
Jesus Christ!
Now, I gotta break down the context because it's not as simple as this. So, Yolanda Saldivar was essentially a super fan of Selena. She contacted her family and said, "I am a huge fan of your daughter. I want to create a fan club in San Antonio and raise her awareness so that more people listen to her." And they liked that, and it became one of the biggest fan clubs in the region. And so because of that, Selena hired her and got to know her, became her friend, and hired her to be the manager of all her boutiques lines that she had out.
Wow.
So she became very, very close to Selena. But the thing that happened is that after embezzling money from the fan club that she helped create, as well as the boutiques line that she was supposed to manage, Selena eventually had to approach Yolanda and be like, "What are you doing?" And she agreed to approach Yolanda and retrieve the financial records that Yolanda had refused to turn over. But Yolanda didn't want to go quietly. She made several excuses, trying to kind of delay the inevitable because she knew she was trapped. She was caught red-handed, but she didn't want to give up that easily. And after attempting to delay, Selena drove by to see the records, which led to Yolanda drawing a gun on her. And as soon as Selena tried to flee, she shot her in the back.
Yeah.
Selena managed to flee long enough to the lobby where the front desk contacted 911, but unfortunately it was too late and she passed away in the hospital due to blood loss.
Yeah. Don't you mean 911? Sorry.
911. What did I say? 911?
You said 911.
Frick.
You say that sentence again. It's all good.
Okay.
You got this out.
Selena managed to make it to the lobby where the front desk contacted 911, but she later passed away in the hospital due to blood loss. Yolanda was prosecuted for first-degree murder and was given a life sentence. Her earliest date for parole is currently 2025, so she's been in prison for most of her life. But I cannot say how much of an impact Selena has had because it's quite large. The impact of her death brought international attention to her and her music. President George W. Bush, also the governor of Texas at the time, where she was, that was her home state, declared April 16th as Selena Day in Texas. And her posthumous album, Dreaming of You, reached the Billboard Top 200, which was unheard of.
Wow.
For that particular genre. It's also kind of worth mentioning how her life and her story has actually kind of set up the lives of other people, especially of the Latin genre, such as Jennifer Lopez, who at that point, when they were making the biopic of her life, was a rather unknown actress. But when she portrayed Selena in the biopic, it brought Jennifer Lopez much attention, and it was started off as a springboard that launched her own successful career. And she's still working to this day. And another interesting fact is that her name would later be the inspiration for Selena Gomez's name. She was named after her.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's like she touched many lives, I would say. She was a very remarkable woman, left this world far too soon, had much acclaim and prestige, and I feel like she's often kind of like not as mentioned as often as most others on the list, and I thought I'd give her a shout out.
Well, what I was thinking as you were telling the story, I'm like, if there hasn't already been a biopic about this, there is going to be one. And when you said that there is one with Jennifer Lopez, I'm like, wow, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Oh yeah, it came out of the night. Oh, she looks so much like her too. Yeah. It's actually phenomenal how well she fit the role.
By the way, going back to one of the fellows I talked about was Tupac Shakur. It is worth mentioning that there was a biopic made about Tupac Shakur called All Eyes on Me, released in 2017.
I heard that wasn't very good.
I did have the pleasure of seeing it with my good buddy who is a Tupac fan.
How did he like it?
Oh, he didn't like it at all. He said, you're better off watching a documentary about Tupac than watching that movie. Although what he and I both agreed on when we saw the movie was the guy that got to play Tupac Shakur in the movie looks almost identical to him. And I actually think that's really cool when biopics can go out of their way to cast actors that look genuinely like their real life counterparts.
Yeah, there is an Ian Curtis biopic actually. It was called Control, and it was released in 2007.
Oh yeah.
And the guy Sam Riley, who performs as Ian Curtis, they actually did an impeccable job of casting everyone. Everyone in the band looks almost exactly like their counterpart.
Yeah.
That was a very good biopic.
But yeah, so, and just for anyone who has seen or not seen All Eyes on Me, the Tupac biopic, the song that plays during his death scene is actually not a Tupac song, which my friend thought was garbage. Yeah, although there is a powerful scene where my favorite Tupac song is played when his mom bails him out of jail. Yeah.
Okay.
So
what's your next pick for the night?
My next pick for the night is actually, I'm gonna go back to the rap community. Okay. Eazy-E. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the story of NWA, another revolutionary rap group, who kind of made their mark on history, and they made their mark on the industry with their big song "Fuck the Police." No, I'm not going to censor that. There was a ton of censorship around that. But so NWA was active from 1987 to 1991, and then there was a comeback in 99 from 1999 to 2002. And then in 2015 and 2016, there were a couple of live reunions, but all their members included Arabian Prince, DJ Yella, Dr. Dre, Eazy-E, Ice Cube, and MC Ren. So as for Eazy-E, he was undoubtedly one of the most powerful and hardworking members of the group. But on February 24th in 1995, Eazy-E was admitted to the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles with a violent cough. He was diagnosed with HIV/AIDS, and he announced his illness in a public statement on March 16th, 1995. It is believed that he contracted the infection from a sexual partner. Because as if you've seen the biopic Straight Outta Compton, this kid was fucking everybody. Seriously.
Well, I mean, yeah, back in those days, the AIDS epidemic definitely spread because of misinformation and a lack of general the prevention methods were not as in high regard as they are now. Now, sexual education is very important.
Yeah. Now, it is worth mentioning that during the week of March 20th, he, having already made amends with Ice Cube for all the drama that they went through, he drafted a final message to his fans, and on March 26, 1995, Eazy-E died from AIDS-induced pneumonia, 1 month after his diagnosis. And he was taken too young at the age of 30. Yeah. Although... but apparently most reports at the time said he was 31 years old due to the falsification of his date of birth by 1 year. He was buried on April 7th of 1995 at Rose Hills Memorial Park in Whittier, California, and over 3,000 people attended his funeral, including Jerry Heller and DJ Yella. He was buried in a gold casket and was dressed in a flannel shirt, jeans, and his Compton hat. And on January 30th, 1996, 10 months after Eazy-E's death, his final album, Straight Off the Streets of Motherfucking Compton, was released. According to his son, Little Eazy-E, Eazy-E was worth an estimated $50 million at the time of his death. And he was born... Eazy-E, his real name was Eric Lynn Wright. So yeah, another very sad story, but again, I'm not a huge fan of rap music, but I feel like
I'm glad you're representing it. Of course, it's very much outside my wheelhouse, so I'm glad we at least touched on some of this.
Yeah, but I also thought that I should talk about this because again, like you said, his death was a dark chapter in the AIDS epidemic that was plagued, no pun intended, by misinformation and.
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely touch on that later in this episode.
Oh,
but,
God.
Yeah, is that all you have to say about Eazy-E?
Yeah, there's not too much to say. He just there's tons of stuff to say, but in terms of how he passed, that's all I can really say. Yeah.
All right. Well, my next pick is going into another genre I'm not entirely familiar with, and that is the metal genre, the heavy variety. This is actually my only bassist on the list. There aren't too many I could really think of at the top of my head. I suppose I could have covered Sid Vicious, because he died rather young. But it's a rather contentious topic, and I think I'd rather save that for later. So my pick is Cliff Burton. The second bassist of Metallica, Burton was a wonderfully proficient bassist, able to scale to the highest end of his instrument, almost reaching the same tonality as an electric guitar. Well-versed, some of his best work was highlighted within the first 3 albums of Metallica's history. If you want to listen to like Master of Puppets or Ride the Lightning, you can hear some really good runs from him. Especially, I think the 2 tracks that definitely define him most as an excellent bassist in his respective category would have to be Orion, which is an 8-minute instrumental, as well as For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Yeah.
When I first heard that song, when you hear that,
I always remember that as the song that opens Zombieland.
Zombieland, yeah. Zombieland. But that's actually a bass guitar.
Yeah.
I thought that was an electric. I couldn't even tell the difference, but it's so nicely distorted, and there's a wah pedal that goes into it. I had no idea that was a guitar.
Are you for real?
Yeah, no, that's a line he invented all the way back when he was 17.
That's crazy.
When he was doing a jam session with his during a battle of the bands. So definitely his contributions, the first 3 albums definitely marked a sort of standard that Metallica held in terms of what Burton was capable of, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But during a tour in Sweden, Cliff and guitarist Kirk Hammett had a dispute over who should get the top bunk inside their rather uncomfortable tour bus. So, after a competitive card game where Burton won with an ace of spades in his hand, Burton earned the top bunk. Shortly afterwards, while Burton was sleeping, the bus skidded off the road and flipped onto grass. At the age of 24, Burton was thrown through the window of the bus that promptly fell on top of him after he landed, killing him instantly. While the bus driver stated that there was signs of black ice on the road, which was responsible for the accident, the bandmates were highly skeptical, as one of them took a walk down the road as soon as Burton died, and he didn't see any traces of black ice, as the temperature was just above freezing, not below. Yeah. However, the driver was not declared at fault, and no charges were brought after the court case was settled. The death of Burton caused future bassists in Metallica, such as Jason Newsted and Robert Trujillo, a great deal of pressure, as Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield would always expect them to play on the exact same level as Burton did back when he was in his mid-20s. Because I was, to them, he was one of the best people they ever played with.
Wow.
Burton was later recognized and placed 9th in the Rolling Stones as the greatest bassist of rock history. And he was posthumously inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of Metallica all the way up in 2009.
Yeah.
So he was a very, very prominent member of the band. He's a very important member of their history. And it's very... I can't imagine the stuff he could have pulled off if he carried on with his career.
No.
Like, it would have been... He probably could have had his own band or something. Like, he was an incredibly talented man.
Yeah.
And it's just a shame. It's just such a silly accident like that can, like, just take you in just a matter of a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Cliff Burton. I would like to listen to more of his stuff for sure. Like, I'll have to take a deep dive into, like, the first 3 albums just to see all the other things he was capable of doing.
Yeah. Okay, so my next pick, just like how my last pick dealt with was a result of illness. My next pick was also a result of illness. The great Bob Marley. Now, Bob Marley was another one of the most revolutionary musical artists in history. Obviously, he was big in the reggae scene. He was very... he was all about peace. He was all about love. His lyrics are euphoric. This is another one of those times where I feel like the man needs no introduction. So he's great. Check him out. Admittedly, like, I know more about the cultural impact that his music had, more so than about, like, his personal life, quite honestly, but...
That tends to be a thing with him. He's become such an icon that people definitely know him more for his music than anything about him personally.
That's kind of, well, that's not going to be the case for, like, another future pick of mine, but we'll get to... I don't want to get ahead of myself. So, in the case of Mr. Marley, in July of 1977, Bob Marley was diagnosed with a type of malignant melanoma under his toenail, and he had to see 2 doctors before a biopsy was made, which confirmed acral lentigious melanoma. Unlike other melanomas, usually the skin is exposed to the sun. Acral lentigious melanoma occurs in places that are easy to miss, such as the soles of feet or under toenails. Although it is the most common melanoma in people with dark skin, it is not widely recognized and was not mentioned in the most popular medical textbook of the time. Bob Marley rejected his doctor's advice to have his toe amputated, which would have hindered his performing career, citing his religious beliefs, and instead the nail and nail bed were removed, and a skin graft was taken from his thigh to cover the area. Despite his illness, he continued touring and was in the process of scheduling a 1980 world tour. The album Uprising was released in May of 1980. Bob Marley and the band completed a major tour of Europe, where it played its biggest concert to 100,000 people in Milan, Italy. After the tour, Marley went to the U.S., where he performed 2 shows at Madison Square Garden in New York as part of the Uprising tour. He collapsed while jogging in Central Park and was taken to the hospital, where it was found that his cancer had spread to his brain, lungs, and liver. Marley's last concert took place 2 days later at the Stanley Theater, which is now the Bennington Theater for the Performing Arts in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on September 23rd, 1980. The only known photographs from the show were included in Kevin McDonald's 2012 documentary film entitled Marley. Shortly afterward, Marley's health deteriorated and his cancer spread throughout his body. The rest of the tour was canceled, and Bob Marley sought treatment at the clinic of Joseph Issels in Bavaria, Germany, where he underwent an alternative cancer treatment called Issels. Again, to any medical experts listening, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name of some illnesses.
All right.
Partly based off an avoidance of certain food. He underwent an alternative cancer treatment, and partly based on avoidance of certain foods, drinks, and other substances. After 8 months of effectively failing to treat his advancing cancer, Marley boarded a plane for his home in Jamaica. During the flight, Marley's vital functions worsened. After landing in Miami, Florida, he was taken to Cedars of Lebanon Hospital for immediate medical attention, where he died on May 11th, 1981, and he was taken from us at the age of 36.
Wow.
And his cancer had just spread throughout his whole body. Very sad. His final words to his son Ziggy were, "Money can't buy life." I'm just gonna leave you with that for a second. Yeah. So it is worth mentioning that on May 21st, 1981, the Jamaican Prime Minister Edward Seaga delivered the final funeral he delivered the final funeral eulogy to Bob Marley, saying, "His voice was an omnipresent cry in our electronic world. His sharp features, majestic looks, and prancing style a vivid etching on the landscape of our minds. Bob Marley was never seen. He was an experience which left an indelible... am I saying this word?
Indelible.
An indelible imprint with each encounter.
Yeah.
Such a man cannot be erased from the mind. He is part of the collective consciousness of the nation." That's a common theme that we're getting is like a lot of the people on our list got shout outs from world leaders. Like you mentioned that Governor Bush, who would later go on to be president of the United States, gave a shout out to Selena. Yeah.
Well, I mean, musicians like touch the world, right? They connect all of us, really.
Just a quick side note. Do you remember when Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau cried when he gave his thoughts on the passing of Gordon Downey, the lead singer of the Tragically Hip?
Yeah, I recall that.
Yeah.
That hurt a lot.
Yeah.
That hurt a whole nation of people right there.
Yeah, I remember. He's not on this list, unfortunately, but because he was also we felt that he wasn't exactly taken too soon. Like the Tragically Hip had an amazing run, and he was in like the latter years of his life.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But yeah, back to Bob Marley. He was certainly I can't think of a person who offered more to the genre of reggae than him. He is essentially the face of that genre. He did so much.
Yeah, I would say he's kind of like the grandfather of reggae. Like he's like the nourishing mentor that like no one can surpass. And I do mean no one because I listen to contemporary reggae once in a blue moon, just like rap. I'm not super familiar with it, but I don't think a single artist in reggae has come close to being as influential in that genre as Bob Marley was.
Yeah, I mean, I
not even his own son. Like, my apologies to Ziggy, but sorry.
I actually very much enjoy reggae. I find it really soothes me and kind of centers me whenever I have a bad day.
Oh.
And it's not a terribly technical genre. It's very laid back and easygoing. Very simple, but at the same time, it's that simpleness that can convey so much if you have someone with the right mind to actually say something, which is what Bob Marley did. He wanted to talk about peace, and he wanted to talk about the importance of life and the value of beauty and the needlessness of like human depravity. You know, like he wanted to like have a positive message in his music.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, no, I was almost about tempted to like cover Bob Marley myself, and beat me to it, but that's okay. Cause
right.
Like you know what? Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, sir.
Great, awesome. Who do you have to talk about next?
My next is another metal guy.
A lot of metal guys on here.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have too much to say. I mainly brought him up because his circumstances were like totally fucking preventable, and it pisses me off every time I think about it. Yeah. My pick is Dimebag Darrell, who was the guitarist for heavy metal band Pantera, as well as his own band Damage Plan.
Yeah.
Darrell Abbott, which is his full name, was a naturally gifted player who, along with other members of Pantera, pioneered in a completely original sound of metal known as groove metal.
Yeah.
After the success of Cowboys from Hell, Pantera rose into prominence in the 90s era of metal. They worked a lot in the 80s, but I think this is where they really hit their groove, with Ozzy Osbourne later calling it one of the top 10 favorite metal albums of all time on his 2017 list.
Yeah.
During a Damage Plan show after splitting with Pantera in Columbus, Ohio in 2004, at the age of 38, Darrell Abbott was shot numerous times on stage by a ravenous fan named Nathan Gale, who also killed 4 and wounded 3 others before he was eventually shot dead by Columbus police. no motive has ever been really established for why Nathan Gale just decided to shoot Dimebag Darrell on stage while he was playing. I don't know how he managed to get through security. Like, it's just like, and this is like a post 9/11 kind of situation.
Oh wow!
Which it boggles me that this was so recent. Well, not like super recent, but recent enough, and it just so happened to play out like this. It ticks me off. Thousands attended Dimebag's funeral, along with high-profile musicians such as Eddie Van Halen, Zakk Wylde, and Corey Taylor. He is also one of the very few musicians to ever be buried in a Kiss casket. Wow. That's right. You could have went online in the early 2000s and ordered yourself a licensed Gene Simmons Kiss casket to lower your body into the ground in. Of course, Gene Simmons donated this casket to Dimebag as Ace Frehley, the original guitarist of Kiss, was a very major influence on Darrell, and he very much encouraged him to carry on a pursuit in music. After his death, his brother Vinnie Paul, who was the drummer of Pantera, carried out in his legacy by forming the supergroup Hell Yeah, up until his own death in 2018. And much like his brother, Paul was also buried in a Kiss casket out of respect. For his work with Pantera, Abbott has been placed in numerous lists as one of the greatest guitarists of all time. Very high on most lists in many regards, which is remarkable because he was actually never classically trained. He never took any lessons, he wasn't formally trained about musicality, he just had a knack for it. In fact, while I was researching him, I heard this quote he said where he often compared guitar tabs to reading a newspaper while trying to play a guitar. He found it so like boring and like counterintuitive to him, so he just never liked tabs. I just thought that was interesting. He seemed like a very nice guy. Like, he just seemed like a really, really genuine person. So, yeah, I don't know why he had to be taken like that, but I don't know, man. Sometimes things like that just happen. And I'm kind of thankful it's not a recurring thing. I can't think of another instance where, like, you're at a show and someone just shoots the fucking musician on stage.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think Dimebag's one of the very few examples of that.
Yeah. Well, wasn't there... there was a songwriter who popularized the song Hallelujah, written by Leonard Cohen.
Leonard Cohen, yeah.
And then the fellow who... I forget his name, but all I know is that he popularized the song Hallelujah at a concert, and then once he got off stage, he too was actually murdered once he got off the stage. I'm not like on the stage.
That's not Jeff Buckley.
Yeah, no, I thought that was Jeff Buckley.
No, Jeff Buckley drowned to death.
Oh.
Yeah, he drowned in a river.
Oh, okay.
I was actually tempted to talk about Jeff Buckley, but I haven't listened to
Jeff Buckley's the guy who popularized Hallelujah.
He did an incredible cover of Hallelujah. Yeah. I loved his... I actually think his version's the best.
Oh, okay.
But no, he didn't get shot. He simply drowned.
Oh, okay.
By accident, so it was too bad.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, that kind of worked out. I wanted to mention him at least once in this episode, so... Yeah. It's a nice segue. What is your pick for the next one?
Okay.
Kind of getting down to the lower end of these lists.
So, the next couple picks before we kind of wrap this up are kings. Not literal kings, but I want to talk about the king of rock and roll. I feel like I could just call him the king, and I wouldn't even have to say his name. No, like, because like that's what a lot of people called him. Like, they didn't even call him by his name.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Elvis motherfucking Presley. Now,
is that his middle name?
I'll tell you his actual middle name. Let me just pull this up here.
What is his middle name?
His full name was born Elvis Aaron Presley.
Oh yeah, it was Aaron. Yeah. That's right.
Now, this guy. What's interesting is.
What's so interesting, Evan?
He was born in 1935, and his musical career kick-started in 1954. So this kid was 19 when he was, discovering his sound. His career is like, I feel like we're gonna have to dedicate a whole other episode to talk about Elvis Presley's legacy and his career. So we're gonna save that for another day. But I'm gonna talk about his fall from grace and his untimely death. Elvis Presley, well, he went through a very rough divorce in the mid-70s with his wife, Linda Thompson. They split in November of 1976. And then he took up a new girlfriend named Ginger Alden. He proposed to Alden and gave her an engagement ring 2 months later, though several of his friends later claimed that he had no serious intention of marrying again. Journalist Tony Sherman wrote that by early 1977, Presley had become a grotesque caricature of this sleek, energetic former self, and that really shows because he was hugely overweight and his mind dulled by the pharmacopoeia he was consuming daily.
He ate a lot of pills and he ate a lot of crap.
Yeah. No, like his diet was shit. He was addicted to medications and other drugs. He was barely able to pull himself through his abbreviated concerts. In Alexandria, Louisiana, he was on stage for less than an hour and was, quote, impossible to understand, end quote. On March 31st, Presley failed to perform in Baton Rouge, unable to get out of his hotel bed. A total of 4 shows had to be canceled and rescheduled. Despite the accelerating deterioration of his health, he stuck to most touring commitments. On the evening of Tuesday, August 16th, 1977, Elvis Presley was scheduled to fly out of Memphis, Tennessee to begin another tour. That afternoon, Ginger Alden discovered him in an unresponsive state on the bathroom floor. According to her eyewitness account, Elvis looked as if his entire body had been completely frozen in a seated position while he was using the toilet, then had fallen forward in that fixed position directly in front of it. It was clear that from the time whatever hit him to the moment he had landed on the floor, Elvis hadn't moved. So this guy literally, like, was in a frickin', like...
compromising situation.
Yeah. Attempts to revive him failed, and his death was officially pronounced the next day at 3:30 p.m. at the Baptist Memorial Hospital. President Jimmy Carter issued a statement that credited Presley with having permanently changed the face of American popular culture. Thousands of people gathered outside Graceland to view the open casket. One of Presley's cousins, Billy Mann, accepted $18,000 to secretly photograph the corpse. The picture appeared on the cover of the National Enquirer's biggest selling issue ever. Alden struck a $105,000 deal with the Enquirer for her story, but settled for less when she broke her exclusivity agreement. Presley left nothing for her in his will. What a douche. But anyways, yeah, I know. So what's so tragic about Elvis is that, you know, do you feel like he was... The theme of this episode is musicians who were taken too soon. Now, Elvis was 42 when he left us. Yeah. So, but do you feel like he was past his prime at this point in history? Because his heyday was the late 1950s and early 1960s.
I think Elvis is a good example of someone who does kind of wear out their prime. And they're no longer as good as they used to be, and no matter how hard they try, the kind of pressure sets in, and they start using crutches to kind of cope. Yeah. And he was kind of one of the first to ever do that too. To kind of have that kind of a downward spiral in rock history.
So he was like one of the first, like, you know, sellouts / deterioration stories.
Exactly. Like, yeah, it was. Oh boy, have you heard of some of the things he liked to eat?
Was he like one of those guys who would like put butter on his steaks or his mashed potatoes or some shit?
I'm not gonna give you a full menu of the Elvis Presley diet, but basically one of his most infamous tastes.
Disclaimer: so to speak does not endorse the Elvis Presley diet. Do not consume for any reason.
Well, I mean, do it while you're young. Your body won't.
Unless you're like a teenager, then
your body won't
fucking
hate
nuts.
Your body won't hate you if you do it young. But when you're in your like 40s and 50s, like when he was in his like late 30s, 40s when he did it, probably not a good idea, especially given his body weight and all that. Yeah. But anyways, the one sandwich that he always liked to eat on a weekly basis was called the Fool's Gold. Now, what a Fool's Gold sandwich is, it's basically a French bread that's been buttered over top and under bottom.
Wow, no stone unturned there.
No, butter on every inch of it.
Jesus.
You cut it in half, You scoop all the breading inside the bread. You empty an entire jar of jelly into one, and you put it into one of the crevices that you dug out, like an entire jar. And then you take the other half and you fill that with an entire jar of peanut butter.
Wow.
Because who needs the spread, honestly, when you can just like cake it with, condiments. And the piece de resistance, you put both halves together with an entire slab of greasy bacon. You eat the whole thing. He would eat the whole thing on a weekly. He would fly out to this one location that served this one sandwich.
Is this that diner outside of Las Vegas where it's like the food is so greasy that like the whole restaurant is in the theme of a hospital, and it's like, you're gonna fucking die if you eat this shit.
No, it was before all that.
Which is a real restaurant, by the way.
I don't doubt it, but no, that wasn't the one. I forgot where it was. It was in the middle of nowhere, basically, kind of like swampland or something. But he would eat this goddamn sandwich on a weekly basis. I think when they actually took a look at his digestive tract, I don't want to be disgusting, but basically his leavings were basically chalk white. I don't even know how the hell that's possible. It's just like, I think his diet was just like eating him up alive.
Well, because I'm half Jewish, I have extended family who has suffered the repercussions of colitis, and that's colitis is unfortunately very common in Jewish men because of all the matzah consumption on and around Passover. So that is really gross.
You know what's the worst part is? I actually tried that sandwich.
Oh, I hope it was worth it.
No.
I
mean, it was different. I never thought I'd put PB&J and bacon, a BLT and a PB&J sandwich together. Yeah. It was worth a try. I don't really recommend it because it doesn't taste that great. But there's this one Daniel Radcliffe movie that kind of like, it's called The F Word, or maybe I think they changed it.
Filmed in Toronto.
Yeah, filmed in Toronto, and they talk about the
F Word is one of the titles. There was another title.
There's another title, I forget.
But
yeah, they talk about the sandwich, and on their when he proposes to the girl, spoiler alert, he hands her a fool's gold sandwich, and they have it at their wedding. And I'm like, okay, I get it, it's cute, but geez, who's gonna want to eat that much shit?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I feel bad for Elvis. It's too bad that he kind of let himself go, and that he struggled so hard to like keep performing well past his prime. But
yeah.
I mean, he was kind of the first to have that kind of like lifestyle, to be so huge and to be like this megastar.
Literally huge.
That too, yeah. And like,
I shouldn't laugh at morbidly obese. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's your body's a temple.
Yeah, no kidding.
You gotta respect it. Otherwise, it's just one way that you can actually end up harming yourself.
Now, had his health problems not gotten the better of him, do you think that he could have made a comeback of sorts? Or do you think he could have adapted to, like, the rock and roll of the 80s?
I mean, well, no, but, like...
Because you have to remember, if you listen to rock music from the beginning of the 60s, compared to rock music at the end of the 60s, it sounds like night and day. So he would have had to adapt to a changing market. And
I mean, when you listen to something like American Trilogy Part 3, and like, that's a glorious song.
Yeah. Especially
the climax.
Yeah.
He had very good vocals even back then, like that kind of like rivaled that of like someone like Roy Orbison.
Yeah.
Who we often felt inferior to.
Yeah.
But I mean he could have just retired. Yeah. He could have, like, I feel like he was kind of just like coasting on his glory days, but like he did release some good music around that era.
Oh yeah.
Of course, but sometimes it's like he should have just taken a break. I think he was overworking himself doing like Vegas shows on a nightly basis.
Oh
like, yeah, it was just he needed a break.
But his legacy still continues to live on, and there are tons of Elvis impersonators all over the world. Heck, all over our city. Like, I know at least 2 Elvis impersonators.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty. It could be a solid gig. Playing at weddings and parties and stuff like that as an Elvis impersonator. Now, Do you feel like I should talk about like conspiracy theories around his death? Because there are some beliefs that says that he didn't actually die. That he.
Oh yeah, they ran away.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you want, I guess.
No, you know what? I don't really like to indulge conspiracy theories on this show. So like, but yeah, no, just know there are theories that he didn't actually die. There are a couple of these theories actually apply to other celebrities that the one I'm gonna talk about next. There actually are some conspiracy theories around.
Yeah,
as well.
my last one has some conspiracies of themselves.
Yeah.
I suppose I shall move on to the next one.
Yeah, sure.
Well, you just so happen to pick one of the greatest rock stars, and I decided to pick one of the greatest rock stars as well, Mr. John Lennon of the Beatles. Now, obviously, he needs no real introduction. The frontman of the Beatles, one of the primary songwriters, along with Paul McCartney.
The guy who hogged the limelight in the public eye
and said some silly things, which I will mention later.
Oh god.
But anyways, yeah, John Lennon was a hugely successful musician even after the dissolution of the Beatles in 1970. After a good 10-year run with the band, he had creative differences, especially with Paul and George, and decided to pursue his own solo career, which was respectable. Throughout the 70s, as well as numerous collaborations with his wife Yoko Ono and her band Plastic Ono Band. I know. While taking residence in New York City, John became a vocal activist and a peace advocate. He also tried to rekindle with his, kind of his estranged son Julian. He also took time away with his other son Sean, and I think the 70s were kind of a time where John just kind of did things for himself. There's one story where he and Paul, who were pretty rough around the breakup, spent a time at a diner in New York, and they saw an episode of Saturday Night Live where Lorne Michaels was like, "I will pay $100 million to see the Beatles come together once again," and John and Michael John and Paul were just like, "Do you want to crash this show?" And just show up unannounced and blow his mind. It's like, "No, I'm too tired." So yeah, that's the kind of stuff he was getting up to in the 70s, as well as bed for peace, where he just sat in a bed for like 2 days with his wife, and it was kind of like a protest. He even made Richard Nixon angry with songs like "War Is Over," "Happy Christmas," and "Imagine."
I mean, you have to remember Nixon was Nixon was one of the most, on top of the Watergate scandal, Nixon was also one of the president after Johnson who furthered the Vietnam conflict, and it wasn't getting any better because America was gaining no ground, and the young boys that kept going over there kept coming back in caskets because war is bad, and
Nixon tried to get him deported.
Jesus Christ!
He actually
I didn't know this.
Yeah, no, he tried to get Lennon deported because he was trying to be a resident, and he hated what he was saying in the airwaves.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, well, we ought to kind of get to it eventually, but during a book signing on December 8th, 1980, at the age of 40, John Lennon came in contact with a Mr. Mark David Chapman.
Oh, boy.
Who was an avid fan of his work.
Was.
Yeah. Certainly, an avid fan of his work, and it's kind of hard to speak of a motivation because Chapman is sort of out of his mind. He had paranoid delusions and things like that. He was very, he did not like how outspoken Lennon was, and especially during the time where he said that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus.
Oh boy.
So yeah, that certainly came back to haunt him.
I was nowhere close to being alive when John Lennon was killed, but I will say this: one of the first killer documentaries I ever saw on TV was called "The Man Who Killed John Lennon." It was all about how crazy Mark David Chapman was, and it's basically excerpts from his psych evaluation, like when he was thrown in the slammer after doing the dirty deed.
Jared Leto portrayed him in a movie. It was called Chapter 23.
Oh yeah. Why Chapter 23?
That was the book. It was the page he was reading when he before he shot Lennon, I think, or something.
Okay.
Something of that matter. I'll talk about that in a second. So 6 hours later, Chapman would accost Lennon and his wife Ono at the archway of their Manhattan apartment, drawing a pistol and shooting him 4 times. Oddly, Chapman did not flee the scene of the crime and instead paced the area while muttering to himself and obsessively reading a copy of Catcher in the Rye that he had on him. Lennon was escorted to a nearby hospital, but unfortunately succumbed to his wounds before he could arrive. Chapman was pleaded guilty for second-degree murder and was given a life sentence of 20 years, being denied parole several times. Lennon's ashes were spread onto Central Park, the location later being used for the Strawberry Fields Memorial dedicated to his memory. I don't know if you ever heard or seen this movie. There's one called Mr. Holland's Opus. And that film, it does a really good job of showing the aftermath of John Lennon's death. The main character, played by Richard Dreyfuss, has a son who is deaf, and he feels bad that he can never really show him the brilliance of John Lennon's work. So, and he kind of feels like angry. It's like, oh, I'm a music teacher, I'm a composer, and I can't teach my son anything about music because he'll never understand.
Yeah.
And there's one moment where he actually uses he learns sign language and like kind of like sound texture kind of devices that were new at the time. And he actually got to sing "Beautiful Boy" to his son, despite being deaf, and the son really loved it.
That's really touching.
Yeah. That movie is so underrated, dude.
I gotta check it out.
Underrated as fuck.
Okay.
The
one thing I just want to add about John Lennon is that one of my favorite movies from 2019 was actually called Yesterday. Not being a hardcore fan of the Beatles, I just thought the premise was so fascinating and it was so enjoyable and lighthearted to watch.
Yeah, that's fun.
The movie it's basically, for those of you who haven't seen Yesterday, the plot is a struggling young musician wakes up one day in a world where, due to some cosmic glitch, no one has heard of the Beatles.
A Mandela effect.
Yeah, due to a Mandela effect, no one except for him knows the music of the Beatles. To everyone except this musician, the Beatles have been erased from existence. So what he essentially does is he performs all their songs, and because no one's heard of the Beatles, his friends think that it's the most beautiful song he's ever played. So they say, you have to make your career out of these songs. And in this reality, all the Beatles are alive, like Paul and Ringo. He does have a nightmare where Paul...
I don't know about George, though. He died of natural causes.
No, but the reason I wanted to bring this... Yeah, no, that's true. George Harrison did die of natural causes, but there is something I want to mention.
The scene, yeah.
Because it's an alternate reality where the Beatles therefore never achieved fame, and therefore John, Paul, and Ringo would all just be Joes going about their lives. They prove that point by... the musician goes to the Oceanside house in Britain where John Lennon took residence, and there's this old guy who, I swear to God, he looks exactly what John Lennon would look like if he were alive today.
No, he did. It was incredible.
Yeah,
I was absolutely shook when I saw that scene.
Yeah, and this guy, John Lennon has no clue who this guy is, and like he's like, why the heck are you talking to me? Like, I didn't do anything to inspire you, yet here you are giving me a hug at my home. It's like, what? Why are you here? But like, it's an oddly touching moment because like,
well, it's not oddly, because it's like, what would happen if he just survived?
Yeah,
he got to live the rest of his life peacefully.
Oh yeah, no, it's such a touching moment.
Yeah, no, I think I teared up too, because it's just like, oh yeah, how can I live in this reality?
And the whole conflict of the movie is he struggles with whether or not it's ethical to... He knows that that someone better than him wrote these songs, yet the world has no clue that these songs existed. So he's torn between the artistic obligation to make the world known of the Beatles, but he also like struggles with whether or not it's ethical to claim these songs as his own because he knows he didn't write them.
Now, I know that John Lennon passed away when he was 40, and I know that's not exactly the youngest age to go, but it's still very young. I think the reason why I wanted to give him a shout-out is that I just think he had so much to offer. He just recently released his album Double Fantasy.
Yeah.
He probably would have continued, and you know, maybe like just after like a few years, the Beatles, like maybe not fully, but they could have had like a bit of a reunion, maybe have like a tour, or maybe just show up on a show or something.
At least until George, at least until George's time came.
That wasn't until like the
90s.
Yeah, late 90s or and it's just yeah, I mean, once John's gone, you can't really have a full-on reunion. It's just not the same without him.
Well, I'm sure to this day that Paul and Ringo make guest appearances like together.
They do. They definitely show up to like, you know, Beatles like events and stuff like that.
Well, as long as, you know, the Beatles that were alive post Lennon got to lend their voices to The Simpsons, it's been done.
Yeah,
it's been done.
The one that got away.
Oh no. So that I do wholeheartedly agree that he was taken too soon.
Oh,
and
easily.
40 by
just so senselessly too. Like it didn't need to happen.
Yeah, like life expectancy may not have been as high back then, but today
to have a random fan just come up and shoot you, that's so tragic.
It's dark. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. You remember how I said the next couple of picks of mine are going to be kings? I talked about the king of rock and roll. Now I'm going to talk about the king of pop, Michael Jackson. Now, Michael Jackson is no stranger to fame and praise and philanthropy, but for all his fame, fortune, and, you know, advocacy and his outspoken, you know, John Lennon style, you know, preachiness of, you know, make the change, be man in the mirror, all that. The latter half of his life was marred by controversy because, well, he needs no introduction, but just a quick little, like, you know, cliff notes. He was born into, you know, a family of entertainers, and he was essentially out of his brothers, he went on to have a musical career, and his sister Janet also had a musical career. Yeah. But so he started as a kid with this adorable little boy singing with the Jackson 5, and then he went on to have his solo career in the which started in the late 70s. But throughout the 80s,
he was on top of it.
The early 80s, Michael Jackson was on top of the shit heap. He was everywhere. Thriller became the highest selling album of all time, and you know, then there was a Pepsi commercial, and then he kind of stepped away from musical recordings. But this is the problem that I have when I talk about Michael Jackson. I was introduced to Michael Jackson not as the legendary king of pop, but as the controversial, he might be a pedophile type of character in the media.
We'd have to touch on this.
Yeah, no, I kept hearing. I remember being in the car on the way to school and hearing Michael Jackson's name on the radio every other day. And I one day asked my mom, who was Michael Jackson? And my mom told me, Evan, Michael Jackson was a musician a long time ago, but he has unfortunately become known as a guy who touches children inappropriately. So I'm like, oh wow. And then, of course, Michael Jackson jokes were fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, in the mid 2000s, in the last decade of his life, the world fucking hated him. Now, I did not, in elementary school, anytime anyone talked about Michael Jackson was to make fun of him. And no one played his music at parties. No one. Like, there was one song, the only song that anyone ever played at, you know, a school dance or his class party was Don't Stop Till You Get Enough.
Really? I would have thought it would have been Thriller, like
no,
a Halloween party.
I have no idea. Well, for some reason, I don't know why, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough was like the one song that you would hear on the radio, that radio stations would play by Michael Jackson.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Yeah, that is the one I often hear.
Because Don't Stop Till You Get Enough is one of those, like, radio earworms that, you know, you hear, and I to be perfectly honest, I knew the rhythm of that song because it's so catchy, but unfortunately I couldn't understand what the fuck he was saying, because in the chorus he essentially he says a sentence that has he makes a sentence that has 5 words, and he had to make it sound like it's 2 words. It's so weird. The chorus is keep on with the force, don't stop till you get enough. That's the chorus. But when you hear him sing it goes keep on with the force, don't stop till you get enough. Keep on with the force. I'm like, what the fuck are you saying? And this was another problem with now. I grew up in a time when, like, talking about Michael Jackson as a musician was actually frowned upon because, like, if you ever complimented his music in public in the mid 2000s, people would look at the height of his controversy. People would look at you weird and unfortunately, here's how I came to discover his music. When I entered high school, I was over at my friend's house, and he played Weird Al Yankovic's Fat music video, and I was laughing my ass off, and my friend explained to me it's a parody of Michael Jackson's song Bad, and then I listened to Bad, and I'm like...
That was your gateway to Michael Jackson.
Yeah, I'm dead serious. No, Michael Jackson is the musician.
Josh is going to love you for that.
Yeah, so essentially, I was at Weird Al Yankovic helped me discover Michael Jackson's music. So what happened was, I listened to Bad, and then I listened to Beat It, and then I listened to Thriller, and the rest of his music kind of follows suit. And I'm like, and I would never talk about it publicly, but his music was good. Like, and I know Lyle, you're not partial to pop music, but...
I'm not particularly fond of Michael Jackson, but you know, he was talented. Yeah. I would not deny his talent or his popularity.
So then, Michael Jackson was one of those celebrities that, you know, he had fallen from grace. He was extremely controversial, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I like his music. There wasn't even... I've gotten into debates with family members as to whether or not he actually did any of the stuff he was accused of doing, and there is still a debate about that going on long after his death, unfortunately.
Well, you have to remember, like, the skin condition he kind of developed.
That's true.
That definitely made his appearance look...
Oh, yeah. No.
Definitely alienated him from the public.
Show a picture of him from when he was 5, and then show a picture of him when he was in his 40s. You'd swear they were two completely different people.
Yeah.
So, anyways, this is another situation where I remember exactly where I was when I heard the news that he died. On June 25th, 2009, less than 3 weeks before the first This Is It show was due to begin in London. That's another thing. Before he died, he was scheduled to do a comeback tour. And the closest thing we will ever get to seeing what could have been is in the award-winning documentary, This Is It. I've seen it. It looks amazing. I feel like he was playing something really cool, but we're never going to see that except for the rehearsal footage. But back to the story. Jackson died from cardiac arrest. Conrad Murray, his personal physician, had given Jackson various medications to help him sleep and at his rented mansion in Holmby Hills, Los Angeles. Paramedics received a 911 call at 12:22 p.m. Pacific time and arrived 3 minutes later. Jackson was not breathing and CPR was performed. Resuscitation efforts continued en route to Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center, and for more than an hour after arriving there, but were unsuccessful. And Michael Jackson was pronounced dead at 2:26 Pacific time. Jackson was administered propofol, lorazepam, and midazolam. These are all the medications that he was taking to keep him stable.
Okay.
His death was caused by propofol overdose. See, I can't even pronounce the shit that he was on. That's crazy.
It's like sleeping
now,
pills, essentially.
This is where... So, I got into how he died, and it is worth mentioning that later on... gotta find this... where's the part where... because one of his doctors was actually accused of murder.
Yeah, there was a lot of conspiracies regarding his death, and people weren't sure if it was an accident or if it was homicide.
Yeah. So,
or even suicide.
Again, there are conspiracy theories as to how he died, but I'm not really going to talk about those. But I want to talk about what his death personally meant to me. So, I knew his music was good, but it was one of those things that because he was so controversial, I just couldn't talk about it. So, when he died... The media completely forgot that he was a figure of controversy, and it was just praise after praise after praise, marathon after marathon of his music videos.
Very two-faced.
The summer of... I remember I was at home, and my buddy Steven messaged me on MSN Messenger saying, "Hey, Michael Jackson died." I'm like, "Are you serious?" Because this Steven guy was known for trickery, so I thought he was pulling my leg. I'm like, "Oh," and then I Googled it. I'm like, "Nope, he died." I had just gone back from seeing Transformers 2 with my buddies back then.
God, this was a long time ago.
Yeah, no. Feel old yet?
Yeah.
So, Transformers 2 was in the theaters, and I got back from seeing it with my buddies, and I was just dicking around on the computer, and then my buddy Steven messaged me, "Hey, Evan, Michael Jackson died." And then, going back to the media turnaround, the media, yeah, like you said, two-faced, did a complete 180. All the jokes about him touching kids, all the jokes about all the sneering and condemning of him, all the mockery, that all disappeared. Within 24 hours, it became unfunny and politically incorrect to joke about his death and how he died, because there were, of course, the edgelords of the day back then said, "Oh, he died choking on a kid's dick." People would get offended by that. Wow. And there was another joke that I actually remember laughing at. Unfortunately for Farrah Fawcett, she died the same day that he did. She died hours before he did, and her death was unfortunately completely overshadowed by Michael Jackson's death. Mm. And there's a joke that said, Farrah Fawcett died and went to heaven, and God asked what she wishes for. Farrah Fawcett wished that all the children of planet Earth would live safe and happy lives. God granted this wish by killing Michael Jackson.
Oh my God!
No, like
that's so bad.
It's so bad, but had that joke. But that's the point. It was bad, but had he not died, that joke would have been funny. So the point is, okay. That was when, of course, I was already a fan of Thriller back then, but his music was everywhere. Like, the summer of 2009, radio stations played his music nonstop. And nowadays, and ever since 2009, all his hits are on the radio. Like, you'll hear songs that you wouldn't hear until 2009 were on the radio, and they still are. Maybe that changed with, 10 years later in 2019, that documentary Leaving Neverland resurfaced, and then that kind of...
That re-sparked everything.
That re-sparked the whole, is it right to talk about Michael Jackson to this day? But
when your episode of The Simpsons gets laid off Disney Plus, you have to wonder just how severe these rumors truly are.
You have to... What I find so strange about that is Josh touched upon this when we covered Stark Raving Dad.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Yeah, no, but I find it so strange because in the 90s, the creators of The Simpsons were actually on Michael Jackson's side. They thought he was the victim of a media circus, and they were treating him unfairly. And I am willing to bet money that Homer Badman was written the plot of Homer Badman was partially inspired by what Michael Jackson was going through in the public eye back in the 90s and in the 2000s. Mm-hmm. So the creators of The Simpsons went from being in his camp to, okay, now it's not really cool to affiliate with him, and take it up with the producers, but I don't think it was right to pull Stark Raving Dad. Yeah, and I was actually chatting with this new person I met on eHarmony, where they said that Stark Raving Dad was one of their favorite episodes. I'm like, that's gonna be an interesting conversation.
It's not an episode where if I think too hard about it, it's like, ooh, the Michael Jackson. It's not like when I watch American Beauty and I see Kevin Spacey being kind of weird and creepy, and I'm like, but with Stark Raving Dad, I don't really get the same connection.
It's a mental patient who claims to be Michael Jackson, but they got the real Michael Jackson to do his voice.
And he does spend a lot of time with Bart, but even then, it's not really. I don't get the vibe.
He spends a third of the episode with Homer, and he spends the last 5 minutes with Bart. That's all it is. So.
Okay, maybe I just haven't seen the episode in a long time, but yeah. Okay.
But yeah, no,
So, how would you wrap up your thoughts on Michael Jackson?
Again, I feel like he was a great fit for this episode because even though age 50, I still think age 50 is a very young age to die at. So
yeah, he's probably the oldest one on our list.
But essentially, we lost something that could have been, because as seen by the documentary This Is It, he was planning something super cool. Whether or not it would have done anything to improve his public image or and his controversies remains a mystery. What do you think his This Is It tour would have done had he been able to actually do it?
I mean, yeah, it would have brought back the fans. It would have possibly resurged his image. I mean, he certainly had certainly a lot of highs. He certainly reached the highest highs of his career. I don't know a lot about Michael Jackson because I'm not much of a fan of him. But at the same time, I do think This Is It. It could have been something for sure. I mean, it is a sad thing that it never came to fruition. Yeah. Considering the amount of effort and dedication he put into it.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Sometimes it's just unexpected.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we reached that. There's been a theme where sometimes something so good could have happened, and it just got cut painfully short. Like the North American tour of Joy Division, for example. Oh, that would have been so good for their career. Or the release of the self-titled from Sublime for Bradley Nowell. That would have been so good, but it's just you got pulled right under the rug. You know, so I don't know. As not a fan, I wouldn't have cared much, but I would have understood why people would have been extremely excited to see that.
Yeah. Well, because people bought ticket. People were going to fly to Europe to go see that show.
Undoubtedly.
Can you imagine being a Canadian and paying money to go to England to see the first This Is It concert? That would be the first time he had performed on stage in years.
I mean, if I love Michael Jackson, maybe.
I would I remember reading people opinion pieces were written by people who were devastated that they paid money for that show and they were never going to be able to see it. That people cried. So the point is, you gotta, even if there is some truth to the controversy, which remains debatable to this day, because the Michael Jackson's estate did file a suit against the accusers in the Leaving Neverland documentary for defamation of character. So that's for the courts to deal with. But regardless of what the controversy is, it doesn't change the fact that Michael Jackson was an incredible performer and an incredible artist. I mean, people still try to replicate the moonwalk perfectly to this day. So that's all I have to say about the King of Pop.
All right, my next pick. I'm gonna be real. This one's actually probably the saddest one of the bunch.
Yeah.
To be honest, just because it was so early in the history of rock.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of cheating here because I have to talk about more than one person, but I'd be very remiss and it'd be very regrettable if I didn't mention all three of these men. So my next pick is Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper. All three of these individuals are often considered major pioneers of classic rock and roll. With Holly's development of a traditional rock band lineup, so that'd be two guitars, a vocalist, bass, and drums. That's something he developed. Valens, in his breakout success of bringing Latin rock to a mainstream audience, which wasn't as well heard of at the time, as well as J.P. Richardson, a level of theatricality to rock and roll, where his stage presence was consistent of portraying himself as a character rather than simply himself. So all three of these men were wickedly popular by the end of the decade. So this is where rock and roll was starting to really get some headway, along with Elvis Presley. And during a Midwest tour in 1959, many performers who were doing this tour, the Winter Ball tour, I believe, were unsatisfied with the way they were being transported to these gigs. So they were all kind of crammed in these buses. And we're not talking about tour buses of the 80s, the 90s. This is 1959. Tour buses were not fully developed by this point. So you're thinking it's practically like a school bus or something. You have to sit in a school bus for hours and days on a time through winter conditions.
Yeah.
Many of the people who had to sit in these buses were susceptible to the flu, as well as frostbite.
Oh, jeez.
So, unable to cope, Buddy Holly offered to charter a plane for their next show in Moorhead, Minnesota. Big Bopper Richardson offered to swap places in order to get on board that plane, as he was suffering from a cold and he couldn't stand being on the bus anymore because of his girth. And Valens won the seat of the plane with a coin toss.
Mm-hmm.
So, however, due to adverse weather conditions and airplane technology not being the way it is nowadays, the plane was horribly thrown off course by heavy winds and was sent nosediving into a field in Iowa.
Ouch.
There were no survivors, and all three musicians, as well as the pilot, died instantly from the crash. Holly at the age of 22, Richardson at the age of 28, and Valens at the age of 17. After hearing the news, Holly's wife, Elena, had a miscarriage shortly after due to the trauma.
Oh, fuck.
So, yeah, there's a incredibly sad moment in rock history. It's one of the earliest signs of a rock tragedy. In music in general, like, this was a really huge hit, and this was, like, almost a turning point for rock and roll music, because then other musicians in this category were getting arrested, or they're retiring to do other things with their lives, or like Elvis went to go fight in the war or something. So it's like rock.
Yeah, no, I forgot to mention that Elvis was drafted for military service in 1958.
Yeah, so this was like around the time where people were like thinking, I think rock and roll's a fad.
Yeah,
it's gonna die. Like, these young men can't do this for the rest of their lives. It's unheard of.
Yeah.
And Don McLean later paid tribute to these following musicians in his 1971 song "American Pie," which coined the term "the day the music died," and that's how the event has been called ever since. So it was, I don't even know what to say. Like, it's just so damn sad how these men had to go in such a violent way as well.
Yeah,
they had their whole lives ahead of them. And yeah, I know we don't really touch on biopics, but if you haven't, I would recommend the Buddy Holly story starring Gary Busey as Buddy Holly. I think that's probably his best performance, hands down. And there's also La Bamba, which covers Reggie Valens' career, his short-lived career, becoming a musician and breaking out in the industry. That was a good tale. There actually hasn't been a big Bopper biopic, I guess. I feel bad for him, but yeah, very, very monumental moment in rock history for sure. Definitely one that put a sour note at the end of the decade of the 1950s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
okay.
what's your next pick, Evan?
So my last pick, my second last pick of the night is the late great Whitney Houston. Now, Whitney Houston, I gotta be honest, I don't know a whole lot about her music. There have just been 2 songs that I have heard on the radio by her, or no, 3. I Want to Dance with Somebody, and there's which your girlfriend really likes. That's my little shout out to Veronica there. But there's also, sweetie. Yeah, there's also I'm Every Woman. That was the #1 song from the soundtrack of The Bodyguard, which she also acted in alongside Kevin Costner. and The Bodyguard is a movie I still have yet to see.
I've not heard of it.
Oh, you've not heard of The Bodyguard?
No.
Oh. Okay, well, yeah, check it out. And also there is... And I will always love you. Yeah, sorry about
that one.
Yeah, there's that, and which that song is like the be all end all like anthem of
that song drives people out of karaoke nights.
Yeah,
if done incorrectly.
Yeah,
it is a dangerous mistress to sing that one.
Oh yeah, no, but Whitney Houston, amazing vocal cords. She was very, unfortunately, taken from us too early at the age of 48. So not quite as old as Michael Jackson.
That's up there. Was she still doing projects? Or?
Well, let's get into that.
Okay.
Houston was reportedly appeared disheveled and erratic in the days immediately prior to her death. On February 9th, 2012, Houston visited singers Brandy and Monica together with Clive Davis at their rehearsals for Davis's pre-Grammy Awards party at the Beverly Hilton in Beverly Hills. That same day, she made her last public performance when she joined Kelly Price on stage in Hollywood, California, and sang Jesus Loves Me. 2 days later, on February 11th, Houston was found unconscious in Suite 434 at the Beverly Hilton Hotel, submerged in the bathtub. Beverly Hills paramedics arrived at approximately 3:30 p.m. Pacific time, found Houston unresponsive, and performed CPR. Houston was pronounced dead at 3:55 p.m. Pacific time. The cause of death was not immediately known. Local police said there were no obvious signs of criminal intent. On March 22nd, 2012, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office reported that Houston's death was caused by drowning and the effects of atherosclerotic heart disease and cocaine use. I can't even... Yeah. I have trouble pronouncing that there, sorry. The office stated the amount of cocaine found in Houston's body indicated that she had used the substance shortly before her death. Toxicology results revealed additional drugs in her system. Benadryl, Xanax, cannabis, and Flexeril.
It's quite a recipe.
Yeah. The manner of death was listed as an accident, quote unquote. So, this is another one of those situations where it's like, I remember it being a big shock because it was right the fuck out of nowhere. Like, it was one of those things like, oh my god, we had no clue that Whitney Houston had a drug problem. But, you know, still, the world, you know, was shocked. It was just a shocker. And I do remember, I don't remember exactly where I was at the time I heard the news. But I do remember, like, her death was a big deal at the time.
I think I was on a field trip.
Yeah.
I don't recall. I think I was on a field trip when I heard the news.
Yeah. This is I believe the Obamas who were currently up for re-election that year. They gave like statements, and I believe they attended her memorial along with everyone else. Because I don't know if you know this, but Barack himself is a big music enthusiast, and if you actually listen to the playlists he makes, you actually might like a lot of his tastes. He's pretty cool.
All right.
Yeah. So there's really not much to say. Like, Whitney Houston was this huge, like, monumental singer, and then right out of nowhere, just gone. So I find this to be like, you know, a cautionary tale of, one, you have no clue what people are going through, and two, like, you know, your heroes, like, could, as Homer Simpson, you know, inappropriately worded it in that Simpsons episode, Bart the Fink, where Krusty fakes his death.
Where are you getting at?
Like, people, like, your heroes can be taken at any time. It's so crazy. Yeah. That's really, again, it was a big shock. Not much to say. Yeah, Whitney Houston was this star who was found dead one day. Very sad.
Yeah, pretty sudden for sure.
Yeah.
Well, my second last pick of the night is someone who asked a very important question. Is this the real life, or is this just fantasy?
Oh.
Are we caught in a landslide with no escape from reality?
Oh.
Open your eyes, look up to the skies, and see.
Is he just
next pick?
Is he just a poor boy?
Freddie Mercury.
So is he just a poor boy who needs no sympathy?
Well, he needs no introduction. For sure.
Yeah. We're going to be here all night if we talk about Queen's legacy.
Freddie Mercury, best known as the lead singer of Queen, as well as his flamboyant stage presence and his impressive 4-octave range, was often considered, and still is to this day, to be one of the most legendary frontmen in rock history.
Yeah.
I mean, I could talk about all the early stuff, but let's go into like why we're here. By the early to mid-'80s, Mercury began to show looming health concerns, as well as an increasingly gaunt appearance. After his Live Aid performance, this, coupled with Queen's lack of touring, began to circulate rumors throughout the press as to why he was starting to become less healthy over time. Mercury was very secretive. He paid very special attention to make sure his health was kept from the public eye. But by the late 80s, and it was very clear that he had contracted something. Him and his partner, Jim Hutton, who was also tested positive in 1990. I guess there's no. I guess it's not really meant to be much secret, but eventually it was revealed that he had contracted HIV and was slowly being affected. His immune system was slowly dissolving as a result. But his partner Jim Hutton spent the last 7 years of Freddie's life caring for him, and he was present with him as well as his ex-wife at Freddie's side as he passed. But that's not to say that stopped Freddie necessarily. Freddie continued writing for Queen and managed to finish the album Innuendo mere months before his passing.
Yeah.
The promotion for the album was very, very challenging for everyone, especially the band themselves after they heard the news. If you watch the music video, These Are the Days of Our Lives, I think it's probably one of the saddest things you'll ever see because Freddie looks so ill.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he looks so gaunt and, like, skeletal. And every single one of the band members, you can kind of see they're kind of like trying to enjoy themselves, but you can see in the back of their minds they're very, very sorry for him, and they haven't. Like Freddie's accepted his fate, but the others have yet to process it. That's the kind of vibe I got from it.
Yeah.
And while they were recording the last song of the album, the show must go on, which is a very appropriate song to end on Queen's legacy, was considered way too challenging for Mercury due to his illness. Recalling Mercury's performance, guitarist Brian May stated, "I said, Fred, I don't know if this is going to be possible for you to sing." But then Freddie said, "I'll fucking do it, darling," slammed his vodka down, and went in and killed it, completely lacerating the vocal track.
Oh, gee. And you listen to The Show Must Go On. It's a very passionate track. But honestly, I'm a huge, fan. I'm not a hardcore fan, but after Led Zeppelin, they're probably, the other rock band that I really got into to help me understand rock music.
Yeah.
The Show Must Go On is a powerful track, and I didn't know that backstory to that song. So now when I listen to it again, it's going to be different for me.
You can really see it as kind of like a swan song, kind of similar to how Atmosphere is kind of a swan song to Ian Curtis, if you ever want to listen to someone's last song. Yeah. Anyways, so after recording the album and receiving nominations and awards and doing his last presentation, Freddie decided to bow out from Queen to spend the remainder of his life bedridden. Yeah. Mercury refused medication that could slow down the process and only took painkillers as he wanted to hasten the illness and be out of his misery. At the age of 45, on November 24th, 1991, Freddie Mercury succumbed to bronchopneumonia as a complication of AIDS. The day before his death, he confided with his manager Jim Beach to reveal his condition publicly. As the first major rock star to ever die from AIDS, the remaining members of Queen developed the Mercury Phoenix Trust and organized the Freddie Mercury tribute concert for AIDS awareness to raise funding for AIDS research. So he was very much a beacon for those who also suffered from the disease before and much later.
Yeah.
And yeah, for sure. And the band itself has still continued to tour to this day, with Adam Lambert filling in the role quite nicely for Freddie Mercury. Unfortunately, John Deacon, the bassist, after Freddie's death, became a recluse, and he refused to do gigs anymore, and he just retired shortly afterwards. But yeah, I mean, it's very unfortunate what happened to Freddie. I feel like had he not have succumbed to his illness, I feel like for sure he would have created much more work with Queen. I don't think anything would have stopped them.
Yeah. Well, that's one of those things that I like to think about. What could Queen have been in the 90s had they continued?
They would have made some
or the 2000s, for that matter.
They would have made some epic tracks. They probably would have even been in a Disney movie. I don't know.
Well, considering how much their songs are used in movies, no, seriously. I don't know if you know, one of the first hit movies that Heath Ledger was ever in was called, not the first, but one of his first, was called A Knight's Tale. That movie exists because someone somewhere decided that, hey, you know what would go great? A jousting sports movie to the tune of 70s rock and roll. And the movie opens with a crowd of spectators at a jousting match, literally making the and it literally sound. When I heard We Will Rock You used in that scene, I honestly thought the crowd was singing We Will Rock You in the movie, but then my mom explained to me, no, that song was like a victory chant and commonly heard at sports games back in the day, but it was made by the band Queen.
Oh, that's a joke.
And also,
well, I mean, they also did soundtracks for other movies, like Queen did the soundtrack to Flash Gordon.
Oh yeah.
Which is honestly the strongest part about that movie.
Yeah.
It really holds up. Yeah, I think they also did the music for Highlander as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I still gotta see the Highlander movies.
Me too. There can be only one. You don't need to see the sequel or whatever else came afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's keep going. We're very close to wrapping this up.
Yeah.
I think for our last pick, I think what we decided was we needed to tackle the phenomenon known as the 27 Club.
Yeah. Now, there were tons of people that I could have talked about, but I wanted to talk about someone that actually died and was another, just like Whitney Houston, this was another shock to the world when she died. Amy Jade Winehouse. She was born September 14th, 1983, and died July 23rd, 2011. I remember I was working on a construction site that my dad was running. This was the summer after I graduated high school, and I do remember everyone was really sad and horrified when they heard when she died and how she died. So, who is Amy Winehouse? This one actually kind of needs an introduction because she was an English singer and songwriter known for her deep, expressive contralto vocals, or I don't know if I'm saying it. She basically was a
contralto.
So I'm gonna start that over. Amy Winehouse was an English singer and songwriter known for her deep, expressive contralto vocals and her electric mix of musical genres, including soul, rhythm, and blues, and jazz. And a member of the National Youth Jazz Orchestra during her youth, Winehouse signed on to Simon Fuller's 19 management in 2002 and soon recorded a number of songs before signing a publishing deal with EMI. She also formed a working relationship with producer Salam Remy through these record publishers. Winehouse's debut album, Frank, was released in 2003. Many of the album's songs were influenced by jazz, and apart from 2 covers, were co-written by Winehouse herself. Frank was a critical success in the UK and was nominated for the Mercury Prize. The song Stranger Than Me won her the Ivor Novello Award for Best Contemporary Song from the British Academy of Songwriters, Composers, and Authors. Winehouse released her follow-up album Back to Black in 2006, which went on to become an international success and one of the best-selling albums in UK history. At the 2007 Brit Awards, it was nominated for British Album of the Year, and she received the award the award for British Female Solo Artist. The song Rehab, which quick side note, Rehab happens to be my favorite song by her. It is a really catchy.
It's definitely one of her best ones.
Yeah, the song Rehab won her a second Ivor Novello Award at the 50th Grammy Awards in 2008. I do remember hearing. I remember that her song being all the rage. I remember watching the Grammys back then, so I do remember that. Then she won 5 awards, then tying the record for most wins by a female artist in a single night, and becoming the first British woman to win 5 Grammys, including 3 of the General Field Big 4 Grammy Awards: Best New Artist, Record of the Year, and Song of the Year. That was for Rehab, as well as Best Pop Vocal Album. But this is where it gets really sad. Amy Winehouse died of alcohol poisoning on July 23rd, 2011, and she was 27. Which goes back to she is a member of what we're going to talk about now, the 27 Club.
I think she's one of the more recent ones.
Yeah, I think unless we missed something, I think she is the most recent member of the 27
At least
Club.
when it comes to musicians, because Anthony Yelchin is a member now.
Well,
but he's an actor.
He's an actor, but I guess he kind of gets an honorary spot there.
He is considered part of the group. It's just like the 27 Club's kind of more reserved for musicians, but essentially it's just the idea that celebrities, there's a noticeable fringe of them that die at the same age, and it's just like more so than other ages.
It's very bizarre. Now, I didn't know a whole lot, but I did know that Amy Winehouse was extremely revolutionary because in 2015 there was that award-winning documentary called Amy, which was all about what it was like to work with her and what it was like to hear her do her work. So aside from being a big fan of the song Rehab, I didn't really know much about Amy Winehouse, but her success was, I lived through her success, and I do remember it, and I remember it being a big shock when I heard the news that she died.
I think my favorite song of hers was, I'm No Good.
Oh, yeah.
That song is great.
Good one.
I always remember, The Freaky Thing. You remember the movie Disaster Movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where they do all these bad parodies of...
Yeah, they do terrible parodies, but they also do celebrity parodies, and one was Michael Jackson...
Of course.
Who lived in a trunk and he wanted to steal little boys or some shit. I forget. He tried to molest Alvin and the Chipmunks. I don't know.
Oh, fucking course.
I didn't write the movie. And then the other one was Amy Winehouse, who was like a half saber-toothed tiger, half like woman, and but the joke was she couldn't enunciate or something.
Wow.
And the weirdest thing is like that both of those like people died like not too far apart from one another.
Yeah, no, 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, this movie is toxic.
Wow. Yeah, no. Aside from the fact that the guys who watch too many movies don't really know how to parody movies
Don't
very
know how
well.
to make movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a big digression. But yeah, can't say I know too much about Amy Winehouse. But yeah, it was a shame how she had to go.
Yeah. And that's too young because, like, imagine what she could have been, like, into her 30s.
Yeah, her 40s.
Or her 40s.
She could have been like her.
She would have been 37 right now had she would have been 37.
Yeah, that was 10 years ago. You know, it's crazy to think, like, John Lennon died, like, as of last year, John Lennon died 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And then he was born 40 years ago before that.
Yeah.
It's such a weird chain of the number 40.
Yeah. So let's close this up with.
Oh yes, I've been waiting for this one. So I decided to pick out of the many illustrious musicians of the 27 Club. I felt it was an easy choice for me to go with probably my favorite rock musician of all time, and that would be Kurt Cobain, the lead singer, songwriter, and guitarist in Nirvana, as well as the spokesman of the apathetic Generation X, with or without his intentions.
Yeah.
Kurt Cobain was an unwilling participant of the burgeoning grunge scene. He wanted to be more of a punk musician, but he kind of fell into this like category. He was unable to cope with his overwhelming popularity following the surprise success of Nevermind and the also successful follow-up In Utero. And I mean, Cobain wasn't he wasn't like someone who was like against it. He was just like someone who was he just wasn't used to it. He had very anti-establishment attitudes. He was like very openly mocking of like the music industry. There's one time where he had to like lip sync a performance on live television, and rather than do that, he just did a piss poor job and treated the whole thing like a farce. So that's the kind of attitude he had. He didn't like doing things like.
I kind of got that when once I actually understood the lyrics of "Smells Like Teen Spirit." I kind of got that, you know.
Well, that song wasn't intended to be as popular as it was.
I find that so. It's kind of like Paranoid with Black Sabbath. They didn't intend that to be famous either.
Yeah, or like Creep by Radiohead or Song 2 by Blur. Like, it's just a song he whipped out trying to parody like typical pop cliches, basically ripping off the Pixies as he admitted self-evidently. And it just blew up. They were on a European tour, and when they got back to the U.S., they were all over MTV, and they were like considered the hottest band.
Yeah.
So, let's go into some personal problems. Cobain developed a very unhealthy dependence on substances like heroin. There's that word again. But it wasn't just because he enjoyed it, it's because it was the only thing that would ease his growing stomach pains, which he had suffered with all of his life, and he felt that heroin was the only thing that could treat his stomach pain, because no matter who he went to get it treated, there was simply no way to alleviate the issue.
Oh, wow.
Unable to find a suitable treatment for his chronic pain, Kurt's dependency on heroin worsened. He would often be sent to rehab numerous times, and even overdosed from a time or two, which led to one story. I'm not sure if this is 100% accurate. Excuse me. Sorry, my throat's dry. Anyways, there was there's a story. I'm not 100% sure if it's true. I tried finding it's just something I heard where like before a show, Kurt overdosed on heroin, which led to his wife Courtney Love having to like administer an adrenaline shot into his heart to revive him, and afterwards he just got up and played the show.
Wow.
Didn't even go to the hospital. He was just like, alright, fine. And then there was another moment where she caught him and he was ingesting like 50 pills in his first attempt to take his life. Like, he was just... I think the thing was he was just bored. He was so tired of like suffering the pain and tired of constantly being under the scrutiny of the media. It seemed like no matter what he did, people always had something to say, and he preferred the solitude that he had previously. It also didn't help that Cobain's family actually had a serious history of suicides. Both his grandparents killed themselves with guns.
Jesus.
As a matter of fact, and I think that was just like one thing that kind of egged him on. On March 31st, 1994, after abandoning his rehab center before he was allowed to leave in Los Angeles, he escaped by scaling a 6-foot wall. He then took a flight back to Seattle, where he happened to be sitting close to Duff McKagan, who, if you don't know, is the bassist of Guns N' Roses. And if you know anything about Nirvana, you know that Guns N' Roses and Nirvana don't mix.
They don't.
No, there's this huge public feud that occurred between the two of them because, like, I don't know, Axl Rose got in his head. It's like, hey, if we got Metallica and my band and your band together, that'd be one of the greatest shows of all time. And Kurt was like, no, that's a stupid idea.
We're nothing like you.
We're a grunge band, you're a hard rock band, and they're heavy fucking metal.
So it was clear that Axl was trying to capitalize on popularity at the time.
I mean, don't get me wrong. That'd be a hell of a show.
It would be, yeah.
But it just doesn't work.
But no, it would have. The only way it would have worked is if you ended it with Nirvana, because then it would have been like
they're not as heavy as the other two. Though.
Yeah, no, it would have been like the serenade. It would have serenaded the audience out of the arena. No, they wouldn't have. We'll just walk away. But
I think it'd just be a lot of noise coming out of the amps, like you always did. But yeah, basically, despite all the feuding and bullshit between Guns N' Roses and Nirvana, McKagan stated that Cobain was nothing but polite to him. However, Duff would later state that he could tell that Cobain was very troubled and distraught, very much unlike himself. And it's often seen that McKagan was most likely the last musician to see him alive.
Oh, wow.
And he was the last person he encountered. Days later, Cobain allegedly took a taxi to a Seattle gun shop to purchase shotgun shells under the pretense that he was being burglarized and he wanted to protect his home.
Right.
And less than a week later, on April 8th of 1994, at the age of 27, Cobain's body was discovered in the greenhouse above the garage at his Washington estate. An electrician named Gary Smith, who was installing security lighting on his premises, was the first to find his body, as well as his now heavily interpreted suicide note. Authorities theorized that Cobain shot himself in the head with a 20-gauge shotgun while heavily intoxicated with heroin. And as we were talking earlier tonight, many fans and conspiracy theorists, still to this day, might I add, are incredibly skeptical towards the explanation that his death was ruled as a suicide, and many have suggested foul play. And more often than not, Courtney Love is tied to the discussion. Mm-hmm. Many people think she killed him because it was like their marriage was on the rocks, and Kurt was already thinking of kind of like dissolving, like breaking up Nirvana and doing his own solo career because he felt Nirvana was a little constrictive of his like musical ability.
Right.
And it was just and I think he was like planning on doing a divorce. He wasn't exactly happy by the end of the relationship, and a lot of people found it was kind of a toxic thing. A lot of his friends were very quick to blame Courtney, and I can't say whether or not because there's no evidence whatsoever. There's like one rumor that she hired a hitman. There's a documentary about that. There's a documentary called Soaked in Bleach, which just touches on so many different aspects of like the theories that maybe he got murdered. Because it's a 20-gauge shotgun. It's not an easy thing to position the way he did. It's a very long gun. It's not like a 12-gauge. Now, it's larger.
It's worth mentioning that just like the Beatles, it is very difficult to get the rights to use their story or their music in a movie.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning. Well, Beatles have had many biopics.
Gus Van Sant did like a movie that was similar to that was inspired by
Last Days, which is sort of a kind of not kind of really biopic about Kurt's last week alive, but it's under the pretense of another artist. But it's it's pretty clear.
So it's kind of like The Master, where it's not directly about the guy who made Scientology. But
or like another movie Gus Van Sant made about the Columbine killers, known as like Elephant.
Yeah,
which I actually really liked. I wasn't really fond of Last Days. I found it very like stuffy and kind of like dull. I didn't really like the presentational ideas that Gus Van Sant went with. But that's just me. I'm actually surprised they have not yet tried to make a biopic about Nirvana. I think there's just so much ground to cover. And to cast someone like Kurt, here's the trick. You gotta get someone who looks enough like him, and there aren't too many people who do. He has an interesting look. You have to have someone who can sing like him, but you also have to have someone who can play like him. And the bitch is Kurt Cobain's left-handed. And there's such a small population of people who play left-handed to begin with.
Well, I mean, maybe there's an actor who we haven't discovered yet, like Rami Malek, who did Freddie Mercury. He shocked the hell out of us. So you never know.
He was relatively well known thanks to Mr. Robot and stuff.
But here's the thing, like, I believed that he was Freddie Mercury when I watched that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the closest I ever got to like seeing a Nirvana biopic was there's this one movie directed by Matthew Lillard. Yes, Matthew Lillard, Shaggy. I
can't believe that's the only thing he's known for.
Well,
he did do other things. He
did in Scream.
He did
SLC Punk.
He did Wing Commander.
Wing Commander, is that the highlight of his career?
No, it's one of the.
Okay, so back to Matthew Lillard. He directed a movie called Fat Kid Rules the World, which is actually a pretty good movie about a insecure, overweight teenager who befriends like a wannabe like punk artist, and the two of them form a band. And the kid they got to play the punk artist, I swear, hand to God, he looks so much like Kurt Cobain.
Oh wow!
His name's Matt O'Leary. You may probably know him as Gary Giggles from Spy Kids, but like when he was in that movie, like he had kind of the hair, he had kind of the same clothing as Kurt. And he had a lot. And his character himself did a lot of the behaviors that Kurt was known for as well. So he was like always a person I consider, like if they had to make a biopic, I would have picked him. But my hands down casting, I don't know who you could get to play Dave Grohl. He's a very unique looking dude as well. I don't know who you could get. But like the hands down, the person you have to get for the bassist, Chris Novoselic, Neville Longbottom.
Oh yeah.
Every time I see
from the Harry Potter franchise.
Yeah, every time I saw him, I'm just like, dude, so much like Chris. Just same height, same build, same kind of like demeanor, everything. Just he'd be perfect as Chris Novoselic.
Yeah.
Matthew Lewis, that's his name. Yeah, even though he's gotten a lot more handsome over the years, so I don't know. He would have to do a lot of work to kind of look like similar to like Chris, who was kind of like a bit of a goofball when it came to the band, but that's okay. So yeah, bottom line, I'm very upset, tremendously upset that Nirvana just did not have the longest run. I know Dave Grohl went on to do Foo Fighters, and you know, all the more power to him. I'm not personally huge into Foo Fighters as much as I am with Nirvana, but you know, I understand why it's so popular, and I understand like why. I'm very glad he was able to find success outside of one band. Yeah. That's not always easy to do with most bands, but I just think like. I've just been listening so much over the past year during the pandemic. I've been listening to so many of Kurt's home tapes, which he recorded in seclusion while like during hiatus or during rehab and stuff. And like so much of his stuff could have been so good with like the whole band playing it at once. Like there's one song, often considered the last song he ever recorded, called Do Re Mi, which is an incredibly beautiful song, especially since it's just him with a drum machine and a guitar and his really ragged voice just singing away. I highly recommend that song for any like Nirvana completionists. That song definitely feels like a swan song that makes me appreciate him all the more. So if he wanted a solo career, that would have been cool. It'd be interesting what direction he would take with that. I'll never forget that awful Family Guy joke where Stewie Griffin goes in a time machine. He has some free time, goes back to fucking April 8th, 1994, and just stops Kurt Cobain from killing himself. Like, hi Kurt, I know you're having problems and you have a terrible taste in women, but here, have some Haagen-Dazs. Lots and lots of Haagen-Dazs. He goes back in time, and Kurt Cobain's alive. He's morbidly obese, but he's alive.
Aww.
Still playing. He's like, you're still alive, you fat fuck. Like, I think it would take a lot more than a little ice cream to help Kurt Cobain.
You know, that's not the only distasteful joke Family Guy's ever done.
of Kurt Cobain specifically.
You remember that fucking joke they did about River and Joaquin Phoenix in the Three Kings episode? Yeah. But anyways,
and that's not even the only time I touched on Kurt Cobain. There's the one that confirms the theory that Courtney Love wanted Kurt dead, where it's like, you can't quit. What if Kurt Cobain had quit? And remember, everyone, say no to drugs. Wow, great concert, Kurt. Your 11th album was a huge success. Hey, thanks. Hey, have you met my wife, Courtney? Who? She's like angry. It's like, my husband has overshadowed me. And then there's the Cleveland show where Courtney Love was just laying on a bed, just like, make love to me, Kurt. And Kurt's just like, voiced by Seth Green, of course, he's like, I'm gonna go to the garage. Be right back, though. And I'm like, what's that implying? Is he gonna, like, shoot himself? Or is he just gonna, like... Although he did it in a greenhouse.
Wow.
He did it in the greenhouse above his garage, so, God, that's a dark joke.
Yeah.
What the fuck? But, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I think, despite the fact that all of the people we have mentioned on this list lived rather short, rather difficult, or rather truncated lives, at the end of the day, I think the work that they have put out for the audience... Sorry, let me reiterate. What I mean to say is, like, I think their work is going to, like, transcend, like, the bounds of time.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of people will look back and say, these people really did something phenomenal with their lives.
Yeah.
And touched, like, millions of people. And that's not an easy task to do. I mean, a lot of people can try their hearts out, and sometimes they don't make it, but, like, those who do, that, like, the music industry is not easy. I mean, I can't say from experience, but I just know, like, from what I've seen from some of these stories, some of these people, like, really struggle to get through. And, I guess at the end of the day, it's the legacy they left behind that has, like, really inspired, like, generations of people, like, way after their time. So, I just found that very interesting. I think that's why I wanted to cover this episode, because I think some of these people, like, deserve, like, discussion. Some of them maybe even a little bit more than others, but I know it's been a tough ride. I know it's been definitely kind of it's been very emotionally draining for me to, like, discuss some of these stories, but at the same time I feel kind of nice, like, sharing it with you.
Yeah, as do I. I feel like this was one of the more profound episodes we've done on this show. But
yeah, it's definitely a deviation from YTV.
Yeah.
Or,
God damn it, Caillou. Anyways, thank you for listening. Join us next time, and have a good fucking night.
Yeah.